Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
4-point game to the rim. Simpson instead will fire. That was short from the get-go. Got his own rebound. Griffiths with 3, with 2. Fernandez got it off, and that'll do it. And Ohio State now 2-1 in league play. Knocks off the Scarlet Knights. 76-72.
He's feeling it right now. He understands the shot fake, the dribble drive, and now a four-point opportunity off the bench for Liam.
Aerial drive inside, and Ware tossing it into the third row.
It was a good play.
Hoiberg looking for Wiltshire. He's feeling it. The 3 rolls around and home. C.J. Wiltshire is on fire. Here's Tominaga. Baseline jumper for 2.
You can see that coming.
Now Lawrence, transition 3. That'll fall. His first from deep tonight. 15-point Husker lead in Baco.
Good morning. Welcome in to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on a Thursday. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We're live on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, as well as on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. No matter where or how you're listening, watching, whatever you're doing, we're on the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Andrew, what's going on, man?
Hey, I'm ready to chop it up with you today.
What are we chopping?
Well, first off,
Hopefully
I got to show
not
people my
onions.
shirt.
Yeah, you do.
So I got, let me set the stage here. I got this shirt for my sister for Christmas.
Okay.
She knows how much I enjoy one position on the football field.
Yep.
And I told her I wanted it kind of like as a gag, and
Yeah.
I'm so happy she got it for me.
Mhm.
And the shirt's actually pretty comfortable. She got it from Amazon. It looks like a child put it together on, as Ravi put it, Microsoft Paint earlier today. But it is a Kickers Are People Too shirt. And we were kind of joking about the little goalpost.
So I think you've told me this before, but I can't remember. Like, where did the obsession with kickers come from?
So I was never allowed to play football
Okay.
growing up.
And you were a soccer guy, right?
And I was a soccer guy because I couldn't play football. And I really wanted to play, it's just my parents never let me. But they said the position I could play
Was kicker?
was kicker.
Okay.
And so I'm like, well, if kicker can be like that relevant, but also like stay relatively safe on the football field,
Yeah.
like, let's ride with it. Well, so then as I was growing up watching the Bears,
Mhm.
and you know this from a few seasons in San Francisco, Robbie Gould was awesome.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, he was incredibly consistent. Anytime he stepped on the football field, it was like,
I
this
was
one's going through.
genuinely concerned when he retired, but our guy Jake Moody has come
Mhm.
through.
And then I started watching highlights of kickers in high school
Mhm.
on YouTube, making career-long field goals or record-setting field goals. And then I found myself watching Jay Feely call that Eastern Michigan field. I think it was Eastern Michigan, where the field goal missed by at least a mile.
Yeah.
And Feely wasn't paying attention and goes right through the uprights. He just barely had enough. Eastern Michigan ties it 3-3, and the graphic pops up and it's 3-0. He just was in his own world. And I'm like, gosh, kickers are awesome. Like, kickers are incredible. And then in high school, when I was covering high school football in Iowa,
Mhm.
there was a kicker at Spirit Lake when I was at the game, which, for those that don't know, Spirit Lake's about 2 hours from Sioux City. It was a drive to get to this football game. And he hit a 54-yarder
Okay.
in high school. And so I'm like, dude, the kickers are the best. Like, because think about it, just for a hot moment. Think about how much pressure
Oh, yeah.
they inherit when they walk onto the football field at any point in the game. Because if you're watching, you're like, well, especially late, because I found myself doing that a little bit with Alabama and Michigan.
Mhm.
Like, oh, Alabama's making their kicks, and that's why they're ahead in this football game. Like, hey, he makes this field goal, it's a 7-point game. Hey, he makes this field goal. He really puts Michigan in a bind.
Mhm.
I think about situations like that when a kicker steps foot on the football field, and, I just got to tell you, they have impact. There are some people that want to get rid of kicking altogether.
Mhm.
Like, there are a lot of football takes out there that are like the kickers have they don't deserve to step foot on the same field that Patrick Mahomes walks on.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, kickers are what make football exciting.
Kickers are people too.
Kickers are people too. Because you step on a game-winning field goal, there's nothing more exciting than watching your guy trot out and try to hit a game-winning field goal.
I mean, we saw it in last year's playoff, right, where Ohio State was more than okay with trying to kick that field goal. They did not get close enough. They got super conservative, and that dude missed it the instant it hit his foot. And, you know, I will say the thing that I didn't expect to talk about kickers for this long, but
neither did I.
The thing that
I could talk about kickers for 20 minutes if you'd like.
So there's two things that you brought up that I want to touch on. Number one, when you see a high school guy make a kick from 50+ yards, it's thrilling.
It's amazing
because you're just like, you're used to high school kickers, and this is no offense to high school kickers, but it's one of the harder things to do. And not everybody has a good one, right?
And all you see are PATs normally out of a high school kicker.
And a lot of times those are a little dicey. Anything more than about 35 yards from most high school kickers, you're like, yeah, let's just go ahead and go for this on 4th and 12.
Mm-hmm.
Probably we like our options better here, unless you're, you know,
Tristan Alvano.
Yeah, unless you're Westside and you go, and I apologize, I forget the kid's name this year, but he was also great for Westside. I'm sure some of our friends are listening could fill me in on his name, and I'm forgetting right now, but. Yeah, most of the time in high school, you don't see a guy. I mean, rarely do you see a 40-yarder. And then when they trot out, you know, a Tristan Alvano or anybody going out there for a 50+ yarder.
Yeah, remember when he made a 55-yarder this year and Rule on the sidelines was like fist bumping and smiling?
Yeah.
Like,
or he made a 50, what was it 57 last year, was it? In high school?
Oh, yeah, it was 57 in high school.
Yeah, not last year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But he made a 57-yarder in high school, and you're just like, what the heck is going on? Yeah, plenty of room, right? And so
no big deal.
Watching a high school kicker kick one from 50+ is thrilling.
And they don't even look like they're trying.
The guys with like the huge, it's like those pitchers that throw 102, like just effortlessly. And you're like, how did that even happen?
It's like Michael Penix throwing a football.
Oh gosh, there's that video. I think DB tweeted it out. There's a video of him getting a ton of pressure in his face, and he throws a back shoulder throw up the sideline. And like he throws the ball so quickly and his motion is so compact, you barely see his arm move.
His arm moves like a T-Rex.
Yeah, but it's perfect. I mean,
there's speed on the ball.
Yeah, he gets it out with velocity and accuracy. And I barely saw his arm move. And I'm just like, what is happening? Like, what just happened there? Because normally when a guy, and that's not his normal motion, right? It's quick and it's efficient. But normally when a guy has a T-Rex motion, it's like a Vince Young type situation or a Taylor Martinez, where it looks like they're trying to get dog poop off their hand. They like they try.
Oh no!
Yeah, you're taking.
I don't know why they became Italian, but
you're taking. No, that's up here. You're taking Molly for a walk. You go to pick up, and like the bag slips out of your hand wrong. You're like,
oh man, dude, I gotta tell you.
And so you kind of do one of these. This is usually what you get out of the T-Rex motion. Whereas Penix, he makes a full motion, but he does it so quickly it looks like a T-Rex motion. And I'm just sitting, and so. Like you're saying with kickers, just the effortlessness to create that much power in that short amount of time is crazy. So I respect kickers. I do think it's a little funny that this guy, and there's other positions you can say this about, right? Pitchers in baseball are one of them. But this guy that could not do anything else on a football field for the most part ends up deciding games a lot.
Well, he's like a closer in baseball.
Well, yeah, it's like pitchers in baseball in general, right?
When you think about a closer or a relief pitcher, you know they can't be starters. And if they try to be starters, they're probably shortening their career, or they can't go deep into ball games.
Or a lot of them started as starters and got moved to the bullpen because they couldn't.
And vice versa. Yeah. Like there are plenty of relief pitchers that turn into starters.
Right.
But when you become a closer, like that's a different animal. It's a different beast.
Well,
and that's what it is to be a kicker. When you're a kicker at the biggest stage, the biggest level, whether it's Power 5 football or the NFL, like you're just different. That's why there's only 32 of you in the NFL.
And you don't, and most teams don't. I mean, you see teams cut and re-sign guys all the time because.
And notice how they re-sign the guys that you know.
Yes.
They don't re-sign just random names and make them kickers. It's like, oh, a guy named Matt Amendola, like that's somebody that we've heard, you know, he's been on a couple of teams. But when they go and lose, let's just say,
like Mason Crosby just got re-signed. This year.
Let's just say JT went down with some type of tightness for a week, and they
Mm-hmm.
needed a kicker on short notice. They would go into free agency, look to sign somebody.
That's done it before.
Right. And they would go and say, oh, Matt Amendola can suffice for this 1 week. I'm not going to go and say, oh, John Smith. Yeah, we're going to have John Smith kick for us.
Yeah, because there's like you said, there's too much at stake. And that's the other thing that I wanted to get to is I'm trying to think of the most pressure-packed situations in all of sports, right? And I'm having a hard time coming up with a higher leverage situation in terms of like the amount of plays you're actually in the game versus the impact you have on the game than kickers, right? And the closest thing that I came up with is soccer goalies because they're in the game all the time, right? But they usually don't have a ton of opportunities.
Maybe like 7 saves.
Yeah, unless you're just getting just a barrage from the other team, in which case you're probably losing, right? Most of the time. But usually you're in the 7 to 9-ish range saves a game. And that's even more than most kickers end up with opportunities. If you count extra points, maybe you get to that 7-ish number if you're scoring a lot. But the impact those types of guys have in such few plays is crazy. And for goalies, I will say the one thing I think is harder about goalies is you get no time to prepare. At least with a kicker, you get the play, you can walk on. Like with a goalie, it's like it's on top of you.
Oh yeah,
like you can maybe see the play developing, but it's on top of you in a hurry, and you got to be ready to go. That I think is really difficult because you're kind of just not. I know you're not just standing there, but it seems like you're just standing there inactive for large chunks of the game, and to stay mentally focused. Now you could make the same argument with kickers. They're on the sideline having to stay locked in. And
but at
focused,
least they get the opportunity to take some warm.
Yeah, you go, you warm up. You're like, hey,
back on the side, and you can see the play developing too. Like your team's moving down the field, so you're like, okay, let me go kick a little bit, loosen up again one more time. But you're right. Like a soccer goalie has to immediately react in the moment. Now, how often are they pressed with breakaways? Not too much
not
at the highest level.
Yeah.
More times than not.
Maybe a couple of games.
Yeah. There could be a random 2-on-1, but you have to be ready for those.
Yeah.
And when you're standing up for 90 minutes of this game, you have to be ready to move and react. As for a kicker, you have some time. You get to watch your quarterback drive down, and you may be kicking a 48-yard field goal right now, but it could end up you're kicking a 27-yard field goal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's really, it's challenging because you don't really know what the task is until you get out there. We have other things to talk about besides kickers this morning, although Travis on YouTube, first he says he's back. Welcome back, Travis. And
welcome.
He's here for all the kicker punter talk. So.
Hey, also, how about we just say it right now? Tristan Alvano will be Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Year.
You're calling the shot?
Let's do it.
All right.
Mark it down.
I'm going to mark it down. Do you want to, do you want to have a penalty if you're wrong?
Yeah, let's do it.
What should our penalties be? Because I think we should make bets against each other more, make predictions.
This is a like plus 1,100 prediction.
Yeah. So this I don't know that this would be a bad penalty. Although there is something to be said for maybe a standing penalty where you're just like so it maybe discourages outlandish predictions. But we'll think
not against kickers for me. I'll do whatever.
So we'll think about that. We'll brainstorm a little bit here. If you have good ideas on what our punishments should be when we lose bets to one another,
I feel like there should be like a punishment of, okay, you lose and you have to drive to Chicago and back without like stopping. Unless you need gas. Like you go to Chicago, it's like a 7.5-hour drive from here. And once you get there, you don't get to you take a picture that you made it there and then you immediately turn around. You don't stay.
I think
that'd be a miserable punishment.
That would be a terrible punishment. That would have to be pretty severe. I was thinking more stuff we could do on the air so that our listeners could enjoy.
Yeah, we can do that too.
That might, maybe that makes a little bit more sense on the payoff. But
maybe it's like that box thing. Remember, like where you put like the weird items in the box?
Oh, like the Jimmy Fallon thing?
Yeah, and you don't know like what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like a situation like that. I'm not a big fear factor guy. I just don't love
I don't either.
touching anything that I can't see.
Right, that you're not sure about.
So that would be a tough one.
Okay.
But I think you could get creative with what's in there. Just please don't do anything that moves.
Nothing weird. Nothing weird. If you want to give us some ideas on punishments or just have any other takes in general about kickers, things like that, you can hit us up on the YouTube stream. Of course, you can join us on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline, 888-638-4876. Or you can hit us up on Twitter as well. I'm at R.A. Lulla. It's at Andrew Rogers CC. CC.
CC me.
Make sure you CC him on that email there. We've got a terrific show for you. We buried the lead a little bit here.
We buried so much. I'm sorry.
It's okay. He got off on his kicker tangent. It's not a big deal.
I just wanted to show off my new T-shirt.
No, it's a terrific shirt. Though I think the only shirt I've gotten like that from Amazon was a World's Okayest Brother shirt.
That's funny.
And it's true. Like I understand. I'm not a I'm not a super engaged brother / uncle a lot of the time.
You were twice.
I got other stuff going on, so it's I just give them a nice present at Christmas and call it a year. But
here, take this Rolex.
Not that nice. They're kids. Come on, man.
Sorry. Here, take this PS5.
Like I got him a basketball hoop one year or something. Like
a Little Tykes one.
No, like a real one, like a big basketball hoop. Like it's a good gift.
Yeah.
Anyway. We've got.
Hey, I never see you, but I'm gonna win you over with my gifts.
That's the thing though, is the less they see me, the more they're like, man, Uncle Robbie's awesome. We want to hang out with him more.
Well, yeah, because you give them awesome gifts.
Yeah, but I don't like hanging out with kids that much because, I don't know. We have nothing in common. What am I gonna do? Like, yeah, let's go watch Paw Patrol or something. Like, what am I doing here? So
you gave them a giant basketball hoop and they watch Paw Patrol?
No, they don't anymore. I don't think. I don't know. I have no idea.
Paw Patrol, I feel like you fizzle out of that age at like what?
I think
6?
I think the youngest
7?
I think my youngest nephew is 8.
And he watches Paw Patrol?
Well, no, I don't know what they watch. I was just the first kids thing I could think of.
I feel like Paw Patrol's made for like really young children.
When I was
really
I was a nanny, I was a big Dinosaur Train guy. Like Dinosaur Train was the stuff.
Yeah, I never watched that.
See, I like dinosaurs, so I was like, this is educational. This is good for me too. Hopefully the show will be a little.
What else is educational? Nebraska basketball, maybe?
Well, we've got some guests I think will be educational.
Oh,
today.
okay, that's great.
Coming up at 7:30, we will talk to Shelton Collier. He's the head coach of your Omaha Supernovas. They start their season off in just a few weeks here. So we'll talk to Shelton about that in the inaugural season of the Supernovas. Whoa, words hard. Coming up at 8, we've got Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. He had a really good interview with Nick Henrich.
That was amazing.
That came out yesterday that we want to talk to him about. Our guy, Brian Edwards at 8:45. He's going to try to make us a little bit of money this weekend with our friends over at Warhorse Sportsbook. Got our regular Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7 at 9. And the little special treat, courtesy of our friend Andrew Rogers here, Kevin Harlan.
Oh, I can't wait to talk to him either.
Is, also as well.
Today.
Ditto. Kevin Harlan, voice of NFL, NBA. I'm sure you've heard him just about everywhere. Will be on the show with us at 9:45. We really appreciate Kevin taking the time to join us. So that's the lineup today. Really good stuff. Of course, we're also going to get to a little Hurrdat hot seat. We don't have a ton of time for the hot seat today, but I have a question that I think we maybe touched on one of your answers with the kickers this morning. So that's a little tease.
See, that's what we do here.
Just a little tease.
We sprinkled things in early.
It's it's called it's a radio tease in the biz. We'll get to that question. I think we're going to do Hurrdat hot seat at halftime. Take a little break in the middle of the show and get some questions in at 8:30. That is the lineup for today. But before we get to Shelton Collier of the Omaha Supernovas, we have to talk about Nebraska men's basketball
because they were outstanding last night.
They played a terrific game against Indiana. I was super impressed, and I don't say this lightly. Obviously, Tominaga had a great game, 28 points, 4 3-pointers, 4-10 from 3-point range. Really, really good night scoring. and Nebraska in general was, I thought, just really impressive. And listen, I don't think Indiana's that good, but they're probably a middle of the pack in maybe upper
Big
middle
Ten team.
Of the pack, Big Ten team. And those are the teams that Nebraska has to beat. These are the teams that Nebraska consistently has to beat. And especially at home, they not only went out, won that game, they did so reasonably convincingly. I felt like they were in control for most of that game. But here's the thing that watching that game that I kind of hit me for the first time and I'm talking about maybe 2 or 3 times since I've been watching basketball. So we're going back 25 years of me watching college basketball regularly. And I'm thinking 2 or 3 times in that 25 or so years, and this is one of them, where I think Nebraska's playing better basketball than Creighton. I like Creighton's pieces better, the roster, but right now, watching Creighton play, was it last night?
Which
2 nights ago?
I was going to say which team, the women or the men?
Creighton. No, yeah, they definitely played better than Creighton women last night.
2 nights ago.
Creighton men played 2 nights ago against Georgetown. Indiana's better than Georgetown, I think. I don't think that's a hot take. Obviously, Creighton came away with a win, but watching them play over the last few games, yes, over the course of the season, they've had stretches where they looked really good. And like I said, I like Creighton's pieces overall better than I like Nebraska's. But at this moment in time, watching Nebraska play, how they're playing versus watching Creighton play and how they're playing, I think Nebraska's playing better basketball than Creighton right now.
Well,
and that's not something you can say a lot.
It was an eye-opening win for this Nebraska team. One, as you put it, this is a game they had to win. If you look at the stretch of games that's upcoming, you have Wisconsin, who's ranked, and that's on the road. You have Purdue at home,
but they're the number
one team in the country. And then, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 games after. You have Illinois, who is 9th, 10th in the country right now.
So Illinois is a little bit further down the road.
They?
Yeah. So you've got Purdue at home, and you go at Iowa, at Rutgers. That at Rutgers one is a bear.
Yeah, Piscataway's an impossible place to play.
It's one of the toughest places to play in the country. Even when Rutgers isn't that good, it's almost impossible to win there.
And then you have Northwestern and Maryland, I think.
Northwestern, Ohio State at home, and then at Maryland on the road. And then you've got Wisconsin at home, and then at Illinois.
Man, Illinois is far down the list. Okay, so
Illinois is a month from today.
Yeah, just save that, put it in your back pocket, watch out for that team, because that team's playing really, really good basketball right now. But as you put it, Nebraska is too, and the defense was excellent last night.
Yeah,
they forced 19 turnovers. I love their activity, and that's something I think they do really well. And what I admire from this bunch is it's all about active hands when they're on D. Plus, I think they do a great job of packing in the perimeter.
Mm-hmm.
And I say the perimeter because I think they extend well. When they move out to the 3-point line, they never encroach going past it. It's kind of like, that's where remember when you were a kid and you were like, oh, this floor is hot lava?
Yeah.
They just never get out there because they know that if they stay in tight, that's where they're most efficient.
Yeah.
So defensively, tremendous job. And you know what? Let's add this too. Josiah Alec didn't score a bucket, but he had 8 boards, and I think he played one of his best games in a Nebraska uniform.
Super active. And as you mentioned, the activity on the defensive side of the ball, really impressive. I was even more impressed with their activity off ball offensively. That's a place they've really struggled, especially under Hoiberg the last few years, and they've really improved this year. Shelton Collier, your head coach of the Omaha Supernovas, coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back.
But it was Wilcher with
Utilize that mismatch right here, experience-wise.
and Tominaga with his first three. Year Eli Rice on the floor for the first time for the Huskers. Tominaga, the split, and the floater drop. Here's Tominaga, baseline jumper for two.
You could see that coming.
In almost 3 minutes, where do they go?
Good active hands because they had masked on the dive. Good active hands by Renew.
Tominaga from Tominaga around the masked screen. He'll try the three, and he'll hit.
Uh-oh. Tominaga has been the beneficiary. Here he gets a nice little screen. The step back. He's feeling it. Doing it from three, doing it from two.
After leading by 8 at halftime. Lawrence through all kinds of traffic. Drops it off to Tominaga for two.
And they put the freshman.
And Lawrence, what a scramble. Tominaga for three. Count it. Oh, my.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on a Thursday, 7:30 a.m. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We are live on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline by the head coach of your Omaha Supernovas, Shelton Collier. Coach, how are you this morning?
Wonderful. Great day to be an Omaha Supernova.
I mean, it's always a great day to be an Omaha Supernova, right?
Yeah, it's a special time for us, that's for sure.
So, Coach, as you kind of get into where I believe exactly 20 days away, from
That's
your
exactly right.
opening match against Atlanta here in Omaha. Kind of where are you at in the process of training camp and getting your team ready to go for that opener?
Yeah, we're so excited. We just got our team back in the gym yesterday. We had our first practice, kind of got acclimated together, had a lot of good energy, a lot of good veteran players with some young players, and they were ready to go, really excited. And you're right, we got a countdown to selling out the CHI Center in about 20 days, so everybody's excited.
Coach, how much different is it coaching a group like this? Obviously, you've got a ton of experience at the collegiate level, but you've obviously got a different group here. How much different is it, or do you think it's going to be than your past experiences?
You know, what I think is really interesting when they say, yeah, you're going to coach a 34-year-old player and a 28-year-old veteran, they still love to play. They still play with an exuberance. They still want positive feedback from a coach. They still want to learn. So coaching is coaching. You know, they want to get better, and we're helping them get better, and we're doing it with the same enthusiasm if we were coaching a 13-year-old player. And they kind of have that childlike mindset in them that they just want to play with an exuberance and play volleyball. So I think it's very much the same. They just love to play the game, and we're helping them get better.
Coach, as you're kind of building your roster for this season, and I'm trying to map it out in my head, so forgive me if it sounds like I don't really know what I'm talking about here. But 14 spots is the number you have to get to, right?
Yeah, we'll have 14 roster players declared by the time we're playing our first match, correct?
And then 22 players are in for training camp?
Yes, that is correct.
So how difficult will it be for you once that number gets closer to, say, 12, 13, and 14 when you're finalizing those final roster spots?
Yeah, and I get that. That's a fair question from outside in. And I'm just going to be honest with you, inside out, we're just so busy right now trying to get the best out of every player and enjoying the process. And we realize that inevitably at the end of the line, there'll be decisions that have to be made. But right now, we're not so much stressing on who we have to maybe not have on our team. Right now, we're just having an awesome training camp. Everybody's invested. People are competing for positions, obviously. But I think right now we're just investing in our team and enjoying the process. And then inevitably, we do have to make some decisions at crunch time right there at the end. And when those decisions have to be made, we'll make them. But I don't think we want people thinking about that as much as just how good we're going to be and how hard we have to train together to be the best team we can be each day in the gym.
So then a short follow-up to that, Coach. Help me understand how many spots are actually available on this team, because you said, I mean, you kind of already have like some players already like locked in, but is every spot available? Is it only a handful of spots?
Well, I guess to clarify that, no spot has been designated as a definite roster spot. In a sense, they're all trying out. Now, anybody with some common sense would know there are some roster players that would seem like they might be legitimate starters and certainly would make the team. So that makes sense. But with that, everybody is, in a sense, just like an NFL training camp, like a Major League Baseball training camp. We're here at training camp. So, you know, if a player underperforms who's a veteran that's supposed to make the team, or someone gets injured, you know, those are things that impact the roster. So we're kind of taking it day by day and enjoying the process together.
We're talking with Shelton Collier, you're the coach of your Omaha Supernovas. Coach, I'm kind of looking at your resume here and some of the places you've been throughout your coaching career. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't have a connection to Omaha prior to this, right?
That is correct. When they reached out and contacted coaches, I was one of the coaches that they wanted to consider. Former Nebraska legend Terry Pettit had a relationship with me. Both of us had worked with USA volleyball teams in the past. I believe that was one of my inroads where they asked him for advice, with him being a legend in the state. And they collected some coaches and they offered me the position. And you're right, I don't have direct Omaha contacts, but I certainly have a high degree of appreciation and respect for what's going on here. And I am fast forwarding my learning process on all the responsibilities and all the people that are here that are really invested in volleyball, which is fantastic.
Well, and Coach, that was kind of my follow-up question was, from the outside, from somebody that, isn't from here or has a connection here, What is the perception of Omaha as a kind of volleyball destination from an outsider's perspective? I mean, obviously, Nebraska had the volleyball day at Memorial Stadium and stuff like that earlier this year. But as you're kind of deciding whether or not to take this job, how much did the support for volleyball in Omaha impact that decision?
Well, I think there's two levels to that. That's a great question. There's two levels to that. One, our ownership group here with Danny White and City Ventures, Jason Derulo, the people that have put together the franchise here are impressive. So they are rolling out a first-class franchise. We've got first-class medical care, first-class support staff. All that's amazing. And then when we had a season ticket event, there's multiple thousands of season ticket holders here already. I think people are invested in the sport. Of course, they know all the college programs here, and those fans are saying, now we have a pro team, so let's go. And I just think it's like no other place in the United States with the pro team, because this is a volleyball state, and people will come watch volleyball. And in other places, they're trying to sell them about volleyball, and here people know that we have volleyball, and they're coming. So it's really exciting.
Coach, what is the city of Omaha in for this season with this team? When you kind of like set the expectations for this group, what can fans expect in year one of the Supernovas?
I think right now, when you look at the TV ratings for college volleyball and attendance at college volleyball, it's growing and growing. And so fans, I think, are engaged with female volleyball players playing with an exuberance and an athleticism. They enjoy the game. They're fun to watch. It's a great sport. And our players play with an exuberance. They're fun to watch. They're celebrating. They're really, really dynamic athletes. And I think in Omaha, everyone's going to have a different famous player. It could be one of the hitters. It could be one of the defensive players. It could be one of the setters. But I think what happens is families and young girls and adult volleyball fans are going to start having their favorite Supernova players, and they're going to get more and more recognized in the city and in the league. And we're going to have stars. So maybe instead of them watching Patrick Mahomes and Steph Curry, they're going to watch our players, and these are going to be their favorite athletes that they enjoy watching to play. So I think we're going to play with a spirit that people are going to say, hey, when you watch this team, they're really, really fun to watch.
Coach, last thing for me here, you mentioned the TV ratings for college volleyball continuing to grow. It's a sport. College volleyball is a sport that's growing nationally. On the professional level, how big do you think this Pro Volleyball Federation can be in terms of the national sports landscape?
Well, what I truly think this can be the number one televised women's sport in several years when they fertilize this area. I know there's some other women's sports that have certainly got a lot of TV coverage, and kudos to them, and that's awesome. But I think volleyball is on the up and coming. You were seeing it with the numbers with the college volleyball attendance and TV ratings. And I think with the financial support of these owners in each of these cities, and more new ownership groups are coming next year with new teams and new TV markets, I really think this is going to be big. And I think more TV markets are going to get involved with the Pro League, and it's going to be more on national telecasts that everybody can get. And I just think it's headed in the right direction to be something really, really exciting.
Coach, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us for a little bit. We can't wait to see you and your team take the court on January 24th, and I'm sure we will be talking to you again soon.
Yeah, let's sell out the CHI that night. That'd be pretty cool.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Thank you, Coach.
All right, appreciate it.
See you, Coach.
That's Omaha Supernovas head coach Shelton Collier. As he said, their goal is to get as many people in that CHI Health Center as possible.
And I think it's a battle of the inaugurals. I believe Atlanta is a new team as well to this league. So let's make sure the Supernovas are the team that comes out on top.
That's January 24th against the Atlanta Vibe at the CHI Health Center. First serve is at 7 p.m. Secure your season and single match tickets now at supernovas.com. Supernovas have NCAA champions, All-Americans, and Olympians on the roster. Join the volleyball movement sweeping across the country and see your Major League Volleyball team, the Omaha Supernovas. Go to supernovas.com. Coming up next, we'll wrap up hour number 1 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Here's Tominaga, baseline jumper for two.
You can see that coming.
Tominaga around the masked screen. He'll try the three, and he'll hit.
Tominaga has been the beneficiary. Here he gets a nice little screen. The step back, he's feeling it.
Lawrence, through all kinds of traffic, drops it off to Tominaga for two. And Lawrence, what a scramble. Tominaga for three. Count it. Oh, my!
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me as well.
Hey, that's me.
That is you. We are here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill on the H&H Chevrolet stage, and we are just hanging out on a Thursday, having a good time. Just talked to Shelton Collier of the Omaha Supernovas and getting us all jazzed up, ready to go for the inaugural match here on January 24th.
And, you know, he said something pretty interesting, and I think it sparked a good talking point when I was asking him about roster spots because, like, just so everybody out there knows, like, 100% transparent, I'm trying to understand just as much as you're trying to understand.
Yeah, it's new.
Like,
this is new for everybody.
How this process kind of works. And seeing the Supernovas show up on volleyball day and seeing some of the players there too, I'm like, well, you already have some of the team, but then you have roster spots available, but are all spots available or some guaranteed? And I appreciated the fact that Coach Collier said, I mean, you can kind of assume some of these spots are going to be filled by X, Y, and Z player because they just have the makeup of a starter. They are former Olympians, like, you know, whatever.
Right.
And it kind of had me thinking, in connection to Nebraska football,
Yeah.
like you kind of have to assume that Dylan Raiola is going to be your starter next year, no matter what. Like, as much as we can talk about today of like, hey, it's going to be an open competition, because that's what Coach Rule had said before we took a break into the new year when we had our holiday break. He walked up to the podium and, was asked the question, talked about it being an open competition. That's kind of like his mojo, though.
Yeah.
So those are the things that he kind of has to say at this point, because that is more coach speak. But I mean, can we just all like take a sip of reality and just mark down that it's going to be Dylan Raiola? Like, that's it.
Yeah, as long as the quarterback room doesn't change before the fall.
But like, what has to happen in that quarterback room for you to say it's not Dylan Raiola?
So the only thing that would have to happen is if for whatever reason, some guy like a veteran from the transfer portal decided like, yeah, I want to come compete.
But I don't know if there's anybody out there still that,
that's a good question. Let's
that
take a look.
holds that status. Because you have like Cam Ward, that's like Will Howard's still available.
Yeah.
But Will Howard's not even connected to Nebraska.
No, he's going to visit Ohio State. That's the latest,
and he's still in talks with USC, and I think he's in talks with Miami a little bit now.
Yes, I think he's maybe passed.
But I don't know
USC.
if there's anybody, Robbie.
So, like, here's an example of a guy. I don't know if he's been connected to anyone, but Jordan McLeod, the quarterback from James Madison, they had a great year. He's from a lower level type guy, so we don't necessarily know what his ability is at this level. If he was just like, hey, I want to come to Nebraska and compete and show that I'm a Big Ten quality quarterback, and if he is, he's a senior, that might be a situation. Now, I don't think he would come to Nebraska. Like, that's the situation we're likely in, is a guy that's capable of winning the job from Raiola is probably not coming to Nebraska, because those guys want to be able to play. And with Raiola in the room, it's unlikely you'll be able to play.
I don't know if Nebraska's bringing in anybody because Raiola's in the room now.
I bet you'll get, I mean, there's a former 5-star out there, Malachi Nelson from USC. He's a guy that talent-wise could probably compete with a Dylan Raiola. Again,
pretty good.
Probably not going to end up in Nebraska's room. What I think will happen, whether it's a walk-on situation or a scholarship or whatever, I do think you will see someone enter that room, but I think it will be more of a Casey Thompson mold, an older guy, kind of a veteran presence. Again, a guy that's really not going to push Dylan Raiola for the job. But as you're right, as currently stated, the job is Dylan Raiola's, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
I just think it's about time that we just admit the fact that it's going to be DR.
Oh, I want it to be DR, right? Like, I do. I would like it if they brought somebody in for a little bit more depth, but I want Dylan Raiola to be the guy. I mean, I said a couple days ago, right? That was one of my resolutions for Nebraska, was get DR ready to play and be your starting quarterback day one. Like, that should be your operating procedure from now until the first game, which I think is August 28th. You get out there and you get Dylan Raiola ready to be your starting quarterback. I still think you should bring someone in for depth and veteran presence in that room.
And you're not wrong there, because depth is huge with what we saw was needed out of the Nebraska quarterback room this past season. But like, I just don't know if we need to be talking about open competitions with a guy like DR in the room.
So,
like, I don't think that's needed. I think you can come up and safely say, like, this is going to be our guy. This is why we recruited him. This is like, you can form an answer without saying, like, hey, he has no game reps. He has no game experience. He's a true freshman. You can form an answer, though, just because he's a 5-star.
So here's where I would push back a little bit at this point, right? Maybe you can say that coming out of spring, right? But until you see him in a college practice, I don't think you can actually say that, because you have the pedigree in terms of his abilities, in terms of what he's done in high school. But until you see him in a college practice, it's really hard to say, yeah, he's the starter, because what if for whatever reason he does, like, his learning curve is a little bit slower than you hoped, right? And you go, hey, maybe, like Malachi Coleman's a great example of this, right? That's a guy that has all the talent in the world. I don't think he's as polished, different positions, so it's hard to tell. I don't think he's as polished as a Dylan Raiola, and he wasn't as highly touted, but he was a high 4-star coming out of high school.
He's a good player.
That's a guy that they're like, hey, he's going to take a little time. He's going to be good. We love him. He's going to be good. Even when they had need at the spot, he didn't necessarily get on the field as fast as some Nebraska fans would want to. I'm not saying that's the case with Dylan Raiola.
Because I think you're in different worlds there.
I agree, but that is a thing we see happen with freshmen sometimes, is it just takes them a minute to get ready to speak.
Yeah,
Now,
DR's different, though. DR's a different freshman.
We don't know.
But what we've seen and who he's trained with and what we've seen out of him at his different high school stops and how he was recruited, going to Ohio State, going to Georgia, like you don't just accidentally end up at those
I understand
places.
that, but until you see him in a practice, if they want to name him the starter after spring, I have no problem with that.
I just don't know what changes in a practice. I mean, I understand what you're saying with the learning curve, but what part of that learning process is going to be the curve? Like, I don't know how much actually needs to curve.
Well,
there.
so A, he's learning a new offense.
Sure.
And B, the game speed's different. I get he played at a real high level at Georgia, but Division I, Power 5 game speed is just different. It takes some guys a minute to catch up to that speed. But
does he catch up to the speed in the spring, or does that happen in the fall?
Well, I don't know, right? But it certainly hasn't happened yet because he hasn't played at all against college players. That's my point, is it could happen in the spring, but that's the earliest it could happen for me because he hasn't even had the opportunity to do that yet. You can't say yes, the plan is probably for him to be the starting quarterback. The expectation is for him to be the starting quarterback. But until you at least see him take practice snaps, you can't say, oh, there's no competition.
With what I see in the room right now, there's no competition.
I mean,
there's nothing there that can compete with Dylan Raiola.
If Dylan Raiola doesn't end up being the day one starter and they didn't add to the room, something went horribly wrong. I agree there. There's something went very poorly, whether it was injury, knock on wood, or not catching up to the speed of the game, whatever it is, right? Not performing the way you need him to in practice, whatever the case is. If Dylan Raiola is not the starter and the room looks like it does today, as it does in August, then yes, something went horribly wrong. I agree. But until you at least see him take practice snaps, you can't just be like, well, there's nobody else.
I think we just need to be realistic and say he's the guy. I just think that's
the plan is for him to be the guy. I agree.
But I know it's to be like that. That's like the key term of that sentence there. To be. I don't think we need that to be. How about we just say be? Like he is,
because he hasn't taken a single practice snap yet. That's why.
Nah, he's it.
You know where he is on the recruiting trail, because he came up to Nebraska yesterday to help try and land.
He's already won without winning on the football field, Robbie.
He's won in basically every other sport at Nebraska except football.
Where he shows up, they win.
We were doing before the show. He's got 2 men's basketball wins under his belt for games he's attended. He's got a baseball game. We figured out what he was at an Illinois Friday night game.
8-4 win
on March 24th, I think it was.
That was with a couple of 5-star tackles and
Baker.
Was Wingo in town.
I think Baker and Wingo were in town on that one. So I think, didn't Baker put off his decision?
He did.
So yeah, I don't know.
He did.
I don't know. Seems I'm smelling something. Anyway, so yeah, he's undefeated with men's basketball. He got a baseball win. He got a women's basketball win on his last.
Yeah, that was his recruiting.
His signing
commitment weekend.
Yeah,
his signing weekend.
His commitment weekend. Yeah, and got a wrestling dual match win on that commitment weekend as well,
which was basically a lock.
Yes, Mike.
Nebraska wrestling is
our guy's undefeated. He's 5-0, unless he's been to some sporting events that we're not aware of at Nebraska. He is 5-0. We're hoping that he can be, we'll call it 10-0, because there's 5 visitors coming between now and this weekend. You've got a couple guys that we talked about yesterday: Dowdell from Oregon, Nair from Wyoming/Texas. You've got a couple linebackers coming in. You've got a wide receiver from Wake Forest as well.
That's Banks.
Jamal Banks. If you can get all 5 of those guys, my guy's 10-0 before he ever takes a snap.
Well, and that's the veteran presence that we've been saying this wide receiving group is needed. Those additions. When we were talking to BC yesterday, he said adding some bodies to the running back room are important. That's Dowdell.
Yeah.
And then you have some other pieces even on defense, which, when we talk to Mitch Sherman next, I think the defense needs a little more credit. I know we'll mention Nick Henrich, but the current defense in the state that they're in, we talk a lot about the offense. Maybe we give a little love to the defense too.
Mitch Sherman from The Athletic coming up next.
We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, kicking off hour number 2 here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We are live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. We're joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline by our friend Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Mitch, how are you this morning?
Hey, guys. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Mitch, maybe you can slap some sense into me real fast because Ravi and I got caught back and forth.
Feel free to slap him, Mitch.
About Dylan Raiola. You slapped me through the screen. I think it's okay to say today that Dylan Raiola is your starter. I really believe that if somebody just came out on this coaching staff and said, hey, Dylan Raiola is going to be the starter next August, like that wouldn't come as a shock to me. And I think it's okay saying that. But for you, are you on like the wait and see until spring mode like Ravi's at?
Well, you have to ask yourself, who else would it be? Because Nebraska's not in a hurry to go back to Heinrich Harburg, who did some nice things in his 8 games as a starter, and I think was hamstrung by the fact that Nebraska was down receivers and running backs during the entirety of his run as a starting QB. But, that's not the guy that they talk to recruits in this class about as the future leader of the offense. I mean, we know that Nebraska had to completely change what it did offensively, in part because of those injuries, but also because of Harburg's skill set. So if he's the other option, then yeah, clearly you're looking at Raiola to be the guy who will start. I mean, Danny Kaelin is going to need some time. He's more of a projection, a developmental quarterback. He doesn't have the same kind of size. I mean, Dylan is coming in at 220, 225 pounds. Like, he's built like a starting quarterback in the Big Ten right now, which is rare to find for a true freshman. So, I don't think you should do that with a true freshman. I don't think you should ever say 9 months before he starts, hey, this guy is the starter, because you want him to have every piece of motivation. They don't know what makes him tick at this point. I mean, we've seen him play high school and have success doing that, but it's a totally different animal that he's got to tackle now. So you want him to have every piece of motivation that he can to come in and use these. He needs these months ahead to turn himself into the player that Nebraska hopes he can be by the end of August next year. So there's not a whole lot of sense in just declaring him the starter. You can know that. And I think inside the coaches' minds in the Nebraska football headquarters, they're fully preparing for him to be the guy. Otherwise, he doesn't fly in from Georgia last night for a basketball game when the Huskers are hosting 2 transfer portal wide receivers. I mean, you don't do that with your backup quarterback. He's the guy that I think everyone expects is going to be the starter in 24, but declaring him that right now, I don't know what the benefit there is.
All right, I'll come back to planet Earth a little bit. I'll give Ravi the win. Right.
I just need him to take a single practice snap first. Like, just give me a practice snap before we name him a starter, please.
Yeah. I mean, you can do it in August. I think it'll be clear when they practice in the spring, and whatever amount of practice that we get to see, or former players get to see, who then tell us what their observations are, or at the actual spring game. I mean, you'll know. I mean, you'll see who's taking the reps with the ones, and if he's healthy, it's going to be Dylan.
Mitch, speaking of that quarterback room real quick, do you expect them to bring in, maybe not competition for Dylan, but maybe like a veteran presence after the spring, just for like a depth purposes at all? Because as you mentioned, if Dylan isn't the guy, there's really not a ton of options you love behind that. You've got a guy that I think they want to redshirt in Danny Kaelin, a guy who'd have to run probably a totally different offense in Heinrich Harburg, and then a couple walk-ons. Do you think they want to bring in someone else just for depth purposes?
Yeah, for the sake of safety. I mean, we've seen it at Nebraska year after year after year that quarterbacks have a hard time staying healthy. And Nebraska's had to go to a backup, I believe, every year since 2015. So to think that it's going to be different in 24 and you're never going to need someone is probably short-sighted. I mean, I know they're hopeful that they can go with one quarterback and he starts 13 games and finishes, in bowl season, and you never have to worry about the backup except in, spot duty when a game's out of hand. But I don't know how realistic that is today. So whatever you can do to help your depth, I think, would be welcome. It's going to take a unique player from the portal. Not a lot of guys are going to want to come in knowing the situation that Nebraska's grooming a 5-star legacy, who's seen as a prodigy to take things over. I don't think that the majority of the quarterbacks in the portal are up for that. You go in the portal because you're looking to you're looking to start, especially if you're an older guy. And there are quarterbacks who have played 1 or 2 years of college who are looking to come in and grow and be developed. But the kind of player that I think Nebraska would look for in the portal is probably an older guy. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a young guy to come in because nobody has more eligibility left than a true freshman. So, I think there every year there's 1 or 2 guys like that who pop into the portal, and Nebraska's going to have to going to have to identify that. Maybe they've already identified that player, but they're going to have to act and they're going to have to make a match. I don't think it's a lock, like it's a done deal, because you just don't know if you're going to make that work. But ideally, yeah, you want to have somebody with some experience who can be a mentor for him, who can help be a leader in that room and be supportive. And then also there, in case he sprains his ankle in week 1.
And as a quick follow-up to that, Mitch, and maybe the quarterback is an answer for this too, but what should the Huskers be prioritizing over anything else now that 2024 has begun?
Personnel wise, or you totally opening up the conversation to everything?
I'll open the question up to everything, because I don't think they know what they want to do on offense yet. Defensively, yeah. I think they look very strong and actually could be a little bit more dangerous this season with the pieces that they have back. And then, even personnel wise.
Well, you can go from the ground up at like every level of program building and find things that they need to do. And, it's just been 1 year. So I think there's a lot that Matt Rule wants to tackle, in every aspect of the program, strength and conditioning, in nutrition, and, they want to move into the new facility and have their headquarters in one spot. They've got, things they want to do with the culture still. There's nothing about Nebraska football that's a finished product right now. But I think what people want to know, and what you're probably asking, are about the portal and the coaching staff. And the priorities, I think, are to figure out what you're going to do with the staff on the offensive side. I don't think they're done. They haven't made any shifts or moves at this point, and I think there will be some. We're kind of now entering that next phase of when the coaching carousel spins. And you started to see already this week some moves made around the country where assistant coaches are on the move, some by their choice, others not by their choice. And when that thing starts to churn, coaches become available. The NFL season is going to end here real quick, and more coaches become available then. So there are coaches who are out of work, who perhaps have been taking the last month or so to look at the landscape and determine, if there's a spot for them on a staff here in 2024. So I think all of that comes into play, and it will impact Nebraska. I do think that you're going to see somebody brought in to coach the quarterbacks. I don't necessarily believe that it impacts Marcus Satterfield and his play calling, but we'll see. It depends on how all of that plays out. So that's a priority right now, because you have this player who's so important to everything you're doing in Dylan Raiola, and put Danny Kaelin in that mix too, because he's part of the future. And you need to know. I think they probably have a good idea, but Nebraska has to be able to move forward with a plan that everybody understands about who's coaching them. And I think it's unsettled, at least on the outside at this point. And then when you start filling pieces on the roster, to me, it starts at wide receiver and running back. And you see just this weekend in this little window where portal players can visit right now between now and Sunday, that they've got players at both of those positions visiting campus, including 2 of them last night.
Mitch, you mentioned that quarterbacks coach, and it's been something we've talked about on the show, and Ravi has mentioned this name. I've seen this name pop up in even your articles before and other articles out there, but Glenn Thomas, that seems to be kind of like the guy that people are leaning as a good fit because he's worked with Rule before. But if it's not Glenn Thomas, who would be next?
I wouldn't get overly caught up with his name or any name. And, they have candidates on the staff. One thing that Matt Rule really likes to do is promote from within. That's why he gives opportunities to young coaches. Some young coaches like a Garrett McGuire are able to work into a position where they're a full-time coach, right away. And then others, he has plans for, but they start in analyst roles or in support staff roles. So it's a possibility that they've got a guy on their staff right now, and Adam DeMichelle, who could end up working on a full-time basis with the quarterbacks. But again, like with Glenn Thomas, who's finishing out the NFL season with the Steelers, and we'll see. It very well, may be a call that's made to him or already has been made to him, and he's waiting this thing through like Nebraska did last year at this time with McGuire and with Rob Dvorak, who were brought in from the Panthers after the regular season ended. if it's not one of those two, I mean, it's wide open. It's difficult for me. I mean, I've heard names, have names in my head, but I don't want to start a bunch of unfounded speculation and say that I think this guy's a candidate or this guy's not a candidate. I think when conversations start to happen, if it's not one of those two, we'll get wind of it and we'll know. And a big part of that, in often is what's going on next week in Nashville. The AFCA convention starts this weekend, runs through until Wednesday. And it's like it's like a beehive of coaching activity between the interviews in the hotel rooms and in the back hallways and the agents who are walking around. And, that convention serves a lot of purposes for coaches to go and learn and visit with other coaches about the game of football. And then the job market is a secondary purpose there. So, we may be talking, we maybe could talk a week from now and have a much better idea about the direction that Matt Rule wants to head than we can say sitting here right now.
We're talking with Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Mitch, you had a sit down or a I'm not sure if it was a sit down or a Zoom or whatever you want to call it with Nick Henrich.
Yeah, that piece was fantastic
recently, and he's had one of the more interesting careers at Nebraska, from being a pretty highly touted 4-star in-state kid to some of the obviously being part of a coaching change, obviously coming back from the injuries to retiring after this past season because of another injury. When you sat down with him, you mentioned earlier about how, Nebraska doesn't know how Dylan Raiola ticks yet. It seemed like we got a lot of insight this past year on Nick Henrich and how he ticks. What did you learn about him between what you saw him coming back from the injury and then your sit down with him for the interview for The Athletic?
Yeah, it was a phone call for full disclosure purposes. But
I'm going to.
Were you sitting down though, Mitch?
I'm going to continue to call it a sit down just because I can't help myself. But
he was eating breakfast in an airport, and I was sitting down. Yes.
All right.
Well, other than winning championships and playing in the postseason, sadly, he's a guy who I think has experienced about everything in his football career. You kind of laid it out, Ravi, but state champion at Omaha Burke, started to get hit with the knee problems even back when he was in high school. One thing I didn't know until Nick and I talked, and college players, when they're still active, aren't necessarily jumping to reveal the details and extent of all the injuries that they've endured for obvious reasons when they have competitions and games still ahead. But one thing I didn't know about Nick, and he was happy to tell me after his career ended, is that he tore both of the PCLs in his left and his right knee, one in high school and then one during the COVID year in 2020. Didn't have surgery on either of those because that's not required. He was able to rehab them. And then the ACL in his right knee went out in the Purdue game a year ago in 2022. He had that repaired. And then he did it again. In just kind of in a tragic way too, in overtime against Wisconsin, in a game that, not to dig up this old wound, but that didn't need to go to overtime in the minds of a lot of people. So it was the fourth down play. Henrich had just been in on second down and blew up the pass protection and chased Tanner Mordecai out of the pocket, forced a 3rd and long. Mordecai, he came off the field, was okay. Mordecai scrambled to get within 1 yard of moving the chains inside the 5. And then Wisconsin ran it for a first down, and he got blocked or tripped or pushed from behind by an offensive lineman. And you could see it. I went back and watched the replay and putting the story together about Nick after I talked to him, and you could see him just crumple to the ground, and he knew right away that he had done it again. And at that point, there was so much damage in that knee. He hurt the meniscus on this injury too. They had to use a cadaver body part to repair the ACL this second time. Just completely unrealistic to expect that he could come back and play football after that second surgery that he had. So he had no choice but to just give it up. And there goes the NFL dream, because this is a guy for a lot of his career that you could see going and playing in the NFL. I don't know, if he turns into a starter, if he turns into a practice squad guy, as special teams, but I mean, there was a role for him somewhere probably in the league, and it's gone right there after that long list of injuries that ended in the Wisconsin game in November. So to hear his perspective was really interesting, not just on the injuries and the decision that he had, but on his experience at Nebraska through the coaching transition to Matt Rule, and just what he thinks about Tony White and this team going forward.
Stay right there for me, Mitch. What did you take away, or at least what were some of his biggest takeaways from playing under Coach Rule and Coach White for 1 year? Because it seemed like he spoke pretty highly about the two.
Yeah, I mean, Nick's a class guy, and he wouldn't have agreed to the interview if he had bad things to say about anybody that he played for. So it was totally expected that by me that he would say things along the lines of what he did. But it was still I think enlightening to hear him talk about the transition and how the older players on the defense, probably the older players in the locker room. He mentioned Bryce Benhart too in the conversation. They didn't know what to expect when Matt Rule came in, and for the first few weeks that the coaching staff was coming together, they were almost entirely focused on recruiting and putting together that 2023 class. So the returning players didn't get to know them, until we got to about this time last year, and they went to the convention. They came back. They started to work with these guys as Nebraska got into winter conditioning and the mat drills, and that's all the stuff that's coming up here in 24 that I'm sure we'll get a heavy dose of on social media and snippets when we get time with coaches and players. But a year ago it happened under just, I think, a lot of uncertainty. The returning players, and Nick voiced this, they were worried that this new coaching staff would just want to make it all about their guys and bring in their guys and kind of throw the veterans to the side. And he said, that couldn't have been more inaccurate, that as soon as they started to get to know these coaches, they realized how much they valued the older players at Nebraska. And it's probably why the transition, while Nebraska was 5-7 and that wasn't what the Huskers wanted, the transition still went smoothly in 2023. And as far as Tony White, he said that he's not played for a coach who was as dialed in on what an offense was doing, as intuitive and instinctive in how to attack things from a defensive perspective as he felt in this year under Tony White. So, I think he shares the feelings that a lot of people who've watched Tony here over the last 12 months have voiced, in that he's got a really bright future in this game, and Nebraska's fortunate to have him back for another year.
Mitch, want to change gears on you here. Just about a few minutes left with you. I know that you're pretty tuned in with the Gretna community and everything with Gretna high school sports. We've talked a little bit this week about the passing of Brad Feakin, the Gretna boys basketball coach, as well as that incredible game winner that Landon, I don't know how to pronounce it. Pekorski. I always want to leave the R out for some reason. Pekorski hit that same day. Just from your perspective, as somebody kind of tuned into that community, what has that impact have been, not just of his passing, but, obviously he was struggling with this for a little while, and just the impact of his coaching career and his struggle with cancer as he kind of neared the end of his life?
Yeah, I live in the Gretna community, and my kids go to school in Gretna, and my daughter had Brad Feakin as a middle school reading teacher when she was in 7th grade. And, my son's in 7th grade now. I just dropped him off, 20 minutes ago at the school, first day back after break, where Brad taught until this year. He moved to the other middle school in town when the second high school opened, because he wanted to be connected to the kids who would go on to attend Gretna High, where he obviously coached. And when he got the diagnosis a couple of years ago, it was just shocking for the community. I will say that he was as beloved or more beloved, probably had the opportunity to connect with more people as a teacher than he did as a coach. And as a coach, he was revered, just for his style, very old school in the way that he approached his practices and the discipline aspect of it. My 7th grade son went to his camps, as an elementary school kid, and Coach Feakin was invested with everyone. It didn't matter if you were Landon Pekorski, who's now a senior at Gretna and has been a 4-year contributor on that team, and is one of the many guys over Feek's 17 years or 18 years as the coach in this community that whose life was changed by Brad. It didn't matter if you were him or you were like a 4th grader, who could barely dribble. Like you felt like when you were in his gym that he knew you and that he cared about you, that the fact that you were getting better. I'm talking about those camps. Obviously, when he's with his team during the season, it's much more focused on those 10 or 15 guys. But the impact that he had was, it's hard to even describe. And the Gretna community has been, alongside Brad and his wife Jenny and their family, from the beginning of this thing. And it was tough to see him coach through the pain that he was in because of the treatment that he had to endure for the last couple of seasons. But at least there was optimism because he seemed to be doing well. And then this fall, has just been heartbreaking because he's got these kids in Pekorski's class who are seniors. And this is a group that, like many others that he groomed and came up through that program with him and have a chance to, make a run at state in March. And he was not able, because of his illness taking a turn for the worse, to be able to be on the sideline with them for most of the season. So, Saturday night was something entirely different, and it was emotional and heartbreaking and jubilant all at the same time. So our whole family went to the game at Creighton Prep, and I was sitting next to another dad, who's been a coach in this community himself and a leader in youth sports, and he turned to me and said, in the 3rd quarter, this is going to come down to a final possession. With the game on the line and the ball in Landon's hands. And at that time, you had no idea, but it just had that feel in the gym all through that game. And it did. And he made the shot. And, it was probably one of the more memorable sporting scenes that I've ever seen, at any level, just because of the news earlier in the day that Feek had died. So, I'll always remember it. And, I know it's, my thoughts continue to be with the players because it's tough for sure for those guys to the players and the coaches, the assistant coaches to continue to push forward while all this has happened.
Mitch, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your insight into that whole situation as well. I know it's been emotional for everybody in the Gretna community, so thank you for that, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Okay, thanks. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Mitch.
That's Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. More Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I know our folks listening over the radio that the end of that interview got cut off with Mitch Sherman there. We didn't want to interrupt him as he was giving a heartfelt tribute to Coach Feakin there. So if you do want to catch that, make sure you catch any either our podcast, anywhere you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Google, wherever, or you can catch up on one of the streams afterward. I don't know. Can you navigate the stream during the show? Can you like rewind and fast forward on YouTube during the show?
I'm pretty sure you can during live. I don't know if you can.
I don't know if you can on Twitter, but I think you can on YouTube.
Yeah.
So if you want to do that now, you can hop
Twitter,
over.
no, for sure, no.
But YouTube, you can hop over and rewind a little bit. Make sure you catch the end of that Mitch Sherman interview,
and it'll be on the podcast.
Yeah, and it'll be on the podcast as we get those posted shortly after the show. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, as I know some of the over-the-air listeners probably missed the end of that. Well, I know they missed the end of that interview, but it's definitely worth hearing if you did get cut off there. So wanted to switch gears here and do a little Hurrdat hot seat.
Let's do it.
Brought to you by our friends at Dingman's Collision Center. Dingman's, 4 great Omaha area locations, been in business in Omaha, family owned and operated for over 25 years, 18 years, best of Omaha first place. They can work on anything that you've got for them. Well, cars, at least. I don't know if they can work on like your computer or anything, but any car that you've got for them, although cars these days are half computer anyway, so maybe they could. They've got you covered from Fords to Teslas because they invest in the latest technology. They've also invested in the community and continue to do so with their Give Back program. Go check out dingmans.com for more information. Hurrdat hot seat. All right, I've got one. I teased this earlier.
Certainly it's warming up here in the second half.
Is that Kevin?
That's coming up in about an hour. We're going to talk to Kevin Harlan, who is the voice of basically all the major sporting events. One of the very top guys in the profession. So we're super excited to talk to Kevin here in a little bit. But I alluded to your shirt being a possible answer to one of my Hurrdat hot seat questions.
You did.
Okay, so here is the question. There was this big trend on TikTok back in 2023, all the way back in 2023, last year. That's the dad joke for you.
Hey, I made one yesterday and you didn't laugh, so I'm not laughing either.
I appreciate the consistency. There was this big trend on TikTok of how men think about the Roman Empire all the time and how every man has their different Roman Empire. Were you not on that side of TikTok?
No.
Okay. So
I don't really scroll TikTok.
Okay.
Though.
So there was this trend on TikTok about why do men think about the Roman Empire so much? Because apparently, you know how I think men that are of an older generation are kind of obsessed with World War II and old ships and stuff. They have this weird fixation on something.
Right.
Apparently, for a lot of guys our age and a little bit older, or my age and a little bit older, you're younger than I am, that's the Roman Empire. It's a big thing for them. So my question for you was, what is your Roman Empire? What's the thing that you're weirdly obsessed with that you think about way more than is normal for how it impacts your daily life? And I wanted to see if I could get a sports one for you, which would maybe be kickers. That's where, and a non-sports one, because I've got a couple of each. Okay. So I can give you some examples. If that
go
helps.
for it.
Okay.
Go for it.
So one of my sports ones, I have two sports ones.
Okay.
My first one, and this is very on brand for living in Omaha, Nebraska and growing up during the time period that I did. The gorilla ball era of college baseball, I think about all the time. I miss it so much with those bats where they were rocket launchers. I don't know if you follow, there's a social media account called Baseball Bat Bros.
I do not.
So that's this dude. He played college baseball. He's in his 30s now, but he basically just tests out all these different bats and stuff. And every once in a while, he'll buy one from the 90s, and he does the exit velos and the distance and all that kind of stuff. And the bats in the 90s are so hot compared to the bats now. I mean, stuff's coming off at 110 miles an hour from this amateur guy. He is just smoking the ball 450, and it's incredible. I miss those LSU teams.
Yeah, you don't like the BB cores, huh?
No, get out of here, BB core. Get out of here. I want that thing coming off at 120 miles an hour.
You want that to be a backyard baseball power-up bat.
I want it to clear that old batter's eye in Rosenblatt Stadium that was 450 feet away. I want to clear that thing. I want it to land in the zoo. I think about gorilla ball era college baseball way more than is normal.
I like that.
My other one, sports related. Peter Warwick. I think about Peter Warwick all the time.
Why?
Because he was so good. And I like Florida State. And I also, so here's the other thing. I feel like he was way ahead of his time. The stuff that they did with him in terms of wildcat formation, stuff like that, he was way ahead of his time. And there's an interview with, I think it's with TJ Houshmandzadeh, who played with him, overlapped with him with the Bengals a little bit. And was dude, that's one of the best receivers I've ever seen. He just never got to play with a quarterback. And so I'm weirdly obsessed with Peter Warwick. So those are my two sports ones.
Yeah, kickers for me would definitely be the thing that nobody else thinks about but me.
Certainly not to the extent that you do, yeah.
Right. And also watches highlight videos of kickers. Some people may look up Tavon Austin's highlight reel from West Virginia before he made his way into the NFL. No, I watch Tristan Alvano kick field goals at Nebraska.
Peter Warwick is the OG Tavon Austin. Go watch a Peter Warwick highlight video. You'll be blown away.
So kickers would be a good sports one for me. I'm trying to think of a non-sports one that I think about a lot.
So I'll give you my non.
I think about Fortnite way too much.
Okay, so video games.
It's just Fortnite.
Just Fortnite.
Yeah, I don't think about any other video game. I watch streamers play
Fortnite,
but I don't watch it to the degree that some other people would.
Yeah,
I see clips of things as I'm scrolling, and then when I say I scroll, I'm kind of weird, and I scroll on Facebook, and I don't scroll on TikTok in terms of video watching.
Yeah.
And so my algorithm has picked up that I've loved. There's let me tell you what Facebook shows that I really love to watch right now. I bet Everybody Hates Chris is on here.
So you're just
swear
you're just watching the clips of the show.
Yeah, like
I end up
so Friends is on here at the top.
Okay.
Then it goes to Big Bang Theory and Impractical Jokers. Okay. Then you have Family Guy.
Okay.
So those are like the TV shows. And then, I've been watching a lot of Shark Tank videos. We mentioned Mark Cuban yesterday.
Yep.
So if we scroll
And
down
the
to
internet
like
knows everything.
Facebook Reels, wherever that, I know it's going to pop up here soon. Regardless, when I get there, the first video will be a Shark Tank video. I may have scrolled past it. So things like that are kind of what I get obsessed with. I don't really get obsessed in food. I used to, in terms of like, hey, what am I gonna like cook tonight? So then I start watching video. I like the Danos guy.
Okay, yeah. See, that's more practical though, because that's like a thing you actually do.
Yes,
right?
And it's not much of a Roman Empire thing. Fortnite would probably be the weird thing.
So for me, it's Chernobyl.
Huh?
Do you know what Chernobyl is?
No.
Okay. So in the Soviet Union back in the 80s, it's technically Kiev, Ukraine now, or around Kiev, Ukraine. There was a nuclear power plant accident at Chernobyl was the name of the power plant.
Are you like a conspiracy theory guy?
No.
Is that like
no, this isn't a conspiracy theory. I just think it's fascinating.
Okay.
Because so there was an HBO miniseries about this, but I've literally been obsessed with Chernobyl since I was a kid. And so basically there was this whole nuclear meltdown. It's the biggest nuclear power plant accident in history.
Mm-hmm.
And just the fact that it was in the Soviet Union, they were super secretive about it at the time, and really no information got out about it until later because you had some leaks from within the Soviet Union, like as it started to fall. And the like intricacies of why it happened, how it happened, the fallout of it, the cleanup from like the whole thing to me is just fascinating. And because it's like blocked off now because it's, super radioactive, it's really, you really didn't get a ton of information because you can't like go there. They do like these guided tours now, which is idiotic. Don't do that. But for whatever reason, I think it's like nuclear things in general, because I'm sort of obsessed with Oppenheimer too. That movie just came out.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I've always sort of been like the Manhattan Project's always been super fascinating to me. Just this like
historic things. Now you have me thinking about history. Like I'm
and like nuclear history for whatever reason is fascinating to me.
I'm kind of obsessed with treasures, like in terms of like art treasure.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And
like lost art treasures,
dude. My favorite show was White Collar, and it's still probably
terrific
is
show.
My favorite.
I
show.
love White Collar.
Yeah, but like lost treasures,
White Collar or Suits, which.
Oh no! I'm gonna go with White Collar just because
I like White Collar
I've
better.
seen it like the series in full 3 times, and Suits I think is still ongoing.
No, it just
did it end
recently. I think a few years ago.
But
I like White Collar better.
I haven't seen the entirety of Suits either, but I do really like Suits. But yeah, lost treasure always appeals to me.
I like
if I can look up something about lost art,
you're in
of some kind. Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's more of like the weird.
Yeah.
The weird niche.
You're lost treasure guy.
Yeah.
Coming up, we're going to see if Brian Edwards can find us some treasure in Vegas this weekend. He's coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Now, Vegas insider, senior handicapper, and fan of the cold Budweiser bottles, Brian Edwards.
It's got to be touchdown, touchdown, touchdown.
Brian Edwards.
I don't really love it.
Brian Edwards.
Were they using the cream cheese to butter the bagel?
Brian Edwards.
I'm going with the cowgirl.
Here is Brian Edwards.
Wrapping up hour number 2 with our Vegas insider, B. Edwards, Brian Edwards. Want to remind you that if you want to have a little taste of Vegas right here in Nebraska, go check out our friends over at the Warhorse Sportsbook and Casino. They're right now having their Warhorse Festival of Games. Visit Warhorse Casino in Lincoln only to earn entries into their $100,000 prop card challenge and grand prize drawings. You can visit warhorsecasino.com for all the details. In order to participate, you have to go to the casino in Lincoln, but you can always play your sports bets either in Lincoln or in person at Horseman's Park in Omaha as well. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. Brian, how are you this morning?
Doing well, gentlemen. Happy New Year. How we doing?
Hey, buddy.
We're doing well. How'd you do over the weekend with your New Year's 6 games?
Man, I had a really, really good bowl season. Unfortunately, I made one of my biggest bets of the year on Alabama. So, but I mean, that's good and bad. It's good in that my losses, my biggest bet of the year, were mitigated because I had a 22-5 all sports run the 4 days leading up to that. And then I had a really good college hoops and NBA night 2 nights ago. But then I was 2-3 in NBA last night and 0-3 in college. So it's been a little merry-go-round here, but not too bad, not too good. I mean, a 22-5 run.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, but then I have one of my biggest bets of the year, which was a heartbreaking L.
Yeah.
Yeah, we move.
I hate to tell
on.
you this, B. I hate to tell you this. I was on Michigan -2.
Boy, good call. Good call by you.
B, speaking
and hey,
of,
I thought Michigan was the. Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, when they came out and were dominating the line of scrimmage and were getting all that pressure, it felt like Michigan was the right side the whole game. And I will say, I did, when Alabama took a 17-13 and 20-13 lead, I did hedge like just a little bit. It was still a huge loss. I'm not trying to, but I did because I just thought I didn't feel good about my chances of winning really until the 52-yard field goal. And then I thought I had a pretty good chance, but not great. It just felt like Michigan was the right side most of the game, didn't it?
Yeah, I thought they dominated, especially like you said, the line of scrimmage. I thought Alabama made it significantly closer in the second half in terms of
especially the third quarter,
the overall gameplay. But yeah, it felt like Michigan was the right side there. Speaking of Michigan and college football, I know that we won't talk to you again before the national championship on Monday. You do have a play there. Washington's a 4.5-point dog to those same Michigan Wolverines. Where are you leaning on the national championship?
Washington. Now, I've only made a small play so far because I want to see. I mean, I know they're saying Dylan Johnson's going to play, but I kind of need to see some video of him moving around pretty good before I have any confidence in that. And what I'm worried about really more so, well, a couple things. First off, they've got some injuries at running back. And so the two guys that have gotten the most carries behind Johnson are Tybo Rogers, 38 carries, 163 yards, and Will Nixon, 31 carries, 194 yards. That is very low usage for a running back 2 and an RB3. And Dylan Johnson, I was reading this, I think it was from Thor Nystrom. He's got one of the better Pro Football Focus pass blocking grades for running backs. And with the way we saw Michigan getting after the quarterback last week, now Washington does have one of the better O-lines in the country, but Dylan Johnson could be missed in pass protection as well. But also now, Michael Penix, when he was in Indiana, he was more of a true dual threat, but then he tore his ACL twice. Now he's a pure pocket passer, but don't mistake in that he can't move. I mean, he doesn't run much, but he can still scramble and, be elusive in the pocket. And look, they have been an underdog under DeBoer now 5 times when he's been at Washington, have won outright all 5 times. And going back to his last year at Fresno, DeBoer is 7-0 against the spread with 6 outright wins his last 7 as an underdog. So I like Washington. That's what I'm on right now. But I'll be a little more confident if and when I see Dylan Johnson making me think he's going to play and be 90%. And then one prop that I'm on so far is Penix over 297.5 receiving yards. So he has gone
passing, you mean, right?
Yeah. My apologies. Yes, obviously. Thanks. Good catch there. I'm
like, man,
right?
What are the odds on that?
Right? So in 10 of their 14 games, he's had 302 or more. And he had those 2 games where he might have had broken ribs. I mean, he had the rib injuries there in late November where he had 2 games back-to-back where he threw for 162 and 204. But I think he was a little banged up there. But anywho, so Penix over, but more on Washington plus 4.5.
Now, when you look at the NFL slate, because despite it being week 18 and players sitting out and we're going to see a ton of backups, which isn't overly exciting, there are a lot of teams in the hunt still to make their way into the playoffs. So we will have some good games on paper. One being your Atlanta Falcons, who surprisingly still have a chance to make the playoffs because no one knows how to win football games in the NFC South. And so you have the Falcons playing the Saints, which I don't know if you're going to lean your Falcons direction at all. Maybe you'll put a small play on them just because they are your team. But the Saints look like they could be in really good position to lock up that division because for some reason, and I don't know why I feel this way, but the Panthers just seem like they're going to beat the Bucs this weekend. I don't know why. I just have some weird feeling about it. Saints -3. Is that what you're on?
Yes, I am on the Saints -3. So they are 4-3 straight up at home, which is obviously not very good, but the Falcons are 2-5, but straight up and against the spread in 7 road games and got smacked in London, which doesn't count toward that stat. And the Saints' last 3 home wins have been by 18, 22, and 7 points. And regardless of the venue, the Saints are 3-1, both straight up and against the spread in their last 4. Tampa was hot. They go in there and they dominate that game on the road last week. And yeah, the Falcons have just been 1-4 straight up in ATS last 5 road games. I mean, losing to Carolina, losing to Cardinals when it was Murray's, first game, losing at Tennessee when it was Levis's first career start, getting smashed at the Bears last week. I tell you what, it will be the biggest nightmare for Falcons fans. And I know this sounds weird, but if they win and Carolina wins and the Falcons make the playoffs, because every Falcon fan knows that Arthur Smith being fired is the only way this franchise is going to get off the schneid here. So go Bucks and go Saints. Isn't that horrible to not be rooting for your team to make the playoffs?
Right?
But I'm telling you, man, I know if Arthur Smith gets retained, it's just going to be the same old garbage. But anyhow.
There's another game that you've got here in the NFL with the Patriots and Jets. Patriots -1.5. I've got it at maybe as high as -2 now. But before you give us your pick on that one, how careful do you have to be with these Week 18 games because of what Andrew talked about some of the uncertainty about who's going to play and where motivations are?
Oh man, you gotta. It's basically like this bowl season we just got through.
Yeah.
I mean, more than anything, it's just finding out who's going to be in uniform or not, and that's why I only have 2 play. I know it's not that early in the week, but I mean, I feel like we started to get some news yesterday on who's playing and whatnot, but I feel like we'll be getting more. So the only plays I've committed to are the Patriots and the Saints. So New England's just won 15 in a row over the Jets, and the Patriots have suddenly started playing some pretty good ball here. I mean, they've covered 4 in a row. They've won outright in 2 of them. And then, before this 4-game stretch where they've won 2 and covered 4 in a row, even the 4 losses prior to that, they gave up 10 points in one of the losses, 10 points in another one of the losses, only 6 in a 6-0 loss, and 20 in a 20-17 loss. So, I mean, the defense has been playing well for 2 months. And, Zappy didn't play well last week, but he had played pretty good, the previous weeks. And the Jets, Trevor Siemian, 3-11, his last 14 starts. And the Jets on the road this year, 2-5 straight up, 1-5-1 ATS. So I will go with the Pats, who've also not only won 15 in a row, they've covered 6 in a row against the Jets.
Just about a minute left here. How much, if at all, does the fact that this might be Bill Belichick's last game in New England factor into this play at all? How much did you think about that?
I mean, just a little bit, not a ton, but I mean, yeah, definitely a little bit. I mean, Belichick's last game as a Patriot, he's going to lose at Gillette and Foxborough and lose a 15-game winning streak to the Jets. I doubt it. So
no way.
That sounds about right. Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider. B, where can people find you?
At Vegas B Edwards on Twitter. They can find my content on Major Wager. Sorry I didn't have more picks. Light slate in the NBA and hard week on NFL.
No, listen, I mean, you went 22-5 on your little.
You don't have to apologize for anything.
Take
when you have
a little
record
break
like that.
there. We appreciate your time as always. We'll talk to you again soon. All right.
Thanks, fellas. You have a good one.
Hey, thanks, B.
That's Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline. Remember, you can place your bets in Omaha or Lincoln. If you want to get into that prop card challenge for Warhorse Casino, you got to go to Lincoln Warhorse Sportsbook. No bets, no glory. Coming up next, we've got our guy Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back.
Jalen Rager will get the kickoff from Tyler Bass.
We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me. We're live on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and for hour number 3, we're on KFOR in Lincoln. As always, you can check us out on the Twitter, YouTube, Facebook stream, the YouTube comments. We've been talking about Chernobyl for a lot of the last couple segments here, which I'm sure is unusual if you're just tuning in. You're like, wait, why are they talking about Chernobyl? Coming up right now here on the War Horse Sportsbook Hotline is our friend Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Bruntz, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. How you guys doing? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Bruntsy.
Bruntz, what do the holidays look like in the Bruntz household?
Well, he just waits in line for soup, and then he goes home and makes it or eats
That's
it.
true. I eat it. Yeah, I don't. You wait in line so you don't have to make it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
It was pretty low key. I think got two kids under the age of 5, so it's controlled chaos some of the time, but otherwise it's pretty good.
Good. Well, I'm glad you had a low key holiday there. Not so low key here. Actually, before we get into Nebraska stuff, Bruntz, you know what Chernobyl is, right?
Like the location,
like the nuclear,
like
like what happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
because we were having a conversation earlier about are you familiar with like the men thinking about the Roman Empire thing too much?
Vaguely, yes.
Okay, so I was trying to figure out like what is our version, what is the random thing that you think about too much, and one of mine is Chernobyl. Do you have one? Do you have a thing that serves no purpose in your life that you think about too much?
Yeah.
Is it the Oakland A's? I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's probably true.
Ouch.
I don't know. There's a bunch of random things. I don't know that I have just one thing that I usually go back to.
I feel like getting put on the spot with a question like this too is difficult because in the moment I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is what Ravi was talking about.
Yeah.
But until I'm in that moment, don't worry, Bruntz. I could hardly think of anything either. I didn't even know what Chernobyl was.
Oh no.
Don't know me. I didn't learn that in school.
I'll come up with something before the end of this conversation, maybe.
Okay.
I got some random ones.
Don't set that bar. Don't set it.
Bruntz, speaking of setting the bar, Dylan Raiola is in town to help recruit the hopefully some of his receivers to the next class. As far as the guys that Nebraska is bringing in for visits this weekend, where do you think their priorities, where do you think they should be, and where do you think they are in terms of who they need to land the most between the two linebackers, the two wide receivers, and the running back?
Yeah, I think it's on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, I think when you look at, just if you just laid out the depth chart right now and where they've got guys, I mean, I think running back is one where you just need another kind of bigger back, and a guy that can, get in there and carry it 15, 20 times a game if you need him to. And, Dante Dowdell is a little bit more of like what you would think of more of like a typical Big Ten back. I mean, and the running backs that Nebraska was, kind of loosely connected to in the transfer portal to this point, plus Dowdell, I mean, they're bigger backs. They're like the Gabe Ervin type backs. And I think with the question marks around, kind of how Ervin's going to come back from that hip injury, Ramir Johnson's got, is coming back from injury also. He's a little bit of a different back too. I just think you need somebody in that room that you can count on with a little bit more consistency. I mean, I think they love Quentin Ives and what he can be long term, but we haven't seen that. So it's hard to say, this is a guy that's going to be, ready to go in the fall. So that to me is kind of the biggest need right now. And then I think with the wide receiver group, you feel great about the young guys in that room, the Dosses, the Coleman, the Lloyds, and kind of what they were able to do last year and the trajectory that they're on. But I think you need somebody that's a little bit more of a bigger body kind of veteran, and both of the guys that they're going to be hosting during this window, Nair and Banks, are that kind of wide receiver. I mean, they're 6'3", 215 pounds, kind of that ideal size that you look for, a guy that can go and high point the ball and kind of take some of the stress off of those guys, off the young guys, to not have to step in and just be the guy from the get-go this year. So those are kind of the priorities in my mind. And then the two linebackers, there's a need there. I mean, I think getting John Bullock back, that might have been one of the sneaky biggest returns that they had this year, of guys that had decisions to make. But I think, the offensive side of the ball, I think, is where it's probably going to end up being.
Bruntz, you mentioned some of those visitors making their way to Nebraska this weekend. Dylan Raiola on campus, as we saw last night, enjoying his time at the Vault. But it had me thinking a little bit about, okay, Dylan Raiola is there. We talk about how he has influence in recruiting, but how much influence do you think he actually holds in those situations? Like on a scale from 0 to 10, 10 being a lot, how much influence does Dylan Raiola hold?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, Jamal Banks told us that, he was one of the reasons that he was kind of looking a little bit, at least intrigued by Nebraska. I mean, I think anytime you have the number one quarterback in the country, depending on what service you go by, And that guy is going to a place that has not been to a bowl game since 2016. There's kind of like an intrigue there, right? Like, what am I missing that they're seeing there that I'm not? And I think that there's that kind of at play. I think the fact that you just have a quarterback around, I think that helps. I mean, right now Nebraska's quarterback room is in a state of flux, and you've got a guy on campus who's kind of doing some peer recruiting that it could potentially be throwing you the ball. I mean, it's good to have him around. So I think that helps. And it's these transfer portal visits are kind of unique too, because a lot of these guys aren't on campus for the full 48 hours that they're allowed to be. I mean, some guys they're in for 24 hours and then they're on to the next school just because that's the schedule that they're operating under. It's a time crunch. Also, I mean, these guys have been in college for 4 or 5 years. They don't really kind of need the bells and whistles and everything. They just kind of need the kind of list of what they need to see and not all the extra stuff. So, having him around, I think that helps. And it gives you a little buzz. I mean, a little buzz is never a bad thing too when it comes to, trying to sell these guys that your program's on the upward swing.
We're talking to Michael Bruntz of Husker 24/7. You mentioned the sort of anomaly of the number one quarterback in the country, and we'll say that because we use the correct recruiting service, Husker 24/7. We mentioned sort of the anomaly of a guy like Dylan Raiola coming to a place like Nebraska, just in the sense of their recent results. And then we also at the same time are seeing a national championship game between two teams, Washington especially, who has not been your typical profile of what we see in terms of recruiting in that national championship game. Even Michigan is sort of a tier down from that really high level group, your Ohio State, Alabama, Georgias of the world. Do you think that's part of a larger trend, both the Raiola and the national championship game matchup of kind of a growing parity possibly in college football, or do you think maybe we're just looking at an outlier here?
It feels like an outlier. I mean, I think, with the Raiola stuff, I mean, obviously the connection to the program is so huge. So I think that matters more. I mean, I think Kalen DeBoer, I mean, you're talking about, Washington being where they are. I mean, I think he's just a damn good football coach. I think they've found some talented guys. I think they've developed talented guys. And I think what it is more representative of at Washington is what can happen when you find the right quarterback. I mean, I think anybody that's watched Michael Penix, this year or last year knew what kind of arm talent he had. So that wide receiver group they've got is really impressive. And I think it's a really nice mix of system, quarterback, just the coach that DeBoer is. I think that all helps. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's too much evidence that you got to recruit at a high level, at a really high level to kind of get to this point. To say that, there's a trend that's developing, you need to see more. I mean, I'll be curious to see what happens when they expand the playoff. If you start getting teams in there that are, regularly around, like, let's say 20 in the recruiting rankings every year, if that kind of, becomes something. But, Washington to me feels a little bit like more of an outlier, but I don't know that. I think also there's things going on there that you can maybe pull on too, where, like, you get the right quarterback, you get the right coach and everything in the right spot, and maybe you can do something there.
Bruntz, when you and your colleagues are talking to some of these guys as they're either making their college decisions or after they've gotten on campus, how much, because you mentioned the expanded playoff, and I think it's a good point, how much does the ability to compete for a national championship come up in those conversations? I know relationships come up all the time. I know fit and scheme and all this kind of stuff comes up a lot. How much does that come up? Because I do think that the expanded playoff could change things. I'm just curious what you've seen.
Yeah, not much. I mean, it's a lot of it's relationship, and that will always drive the bus. for kids when they recruit or where they commit. I think as it kind of gets going, maybe that'll be more of a factor. I mean, I think schools can be a little bit more honest and not be so disingenuous and say, look, we've got a chance to get in there every year and have a chance to win some games. I mean, I think a lot of the recruits that I talk to, at least, it's more kind of a not as specific with national title type stuff, but like getting things going in the right direction or getting it back to where it used to be or those kinds of things. Not necessarily like we're going to get in the college football playoff, we're going to win when we get there kind of a thing. So maybe that changes, but it's always, to me, I mean, the relationship piece of it is always so huge with recruiting, and at least with this Nebraska staff, I think they've done a pretty good job of developing fast relationships with kids, and you're seeing the results on the recruiting trail now.
Bruntz, all week long and really all offseason long, I know it's been short, but we've been talking about the offense and what needs to improve, the additions we'd like to see. I want to give the defense some more love now, though, or at least some credit for who they were able to bring in and retain this offseason. Do you think they'll be equally intimidating or more daunting in Tony White's second Huskers season?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've got a chance to kind of take another step. I mean, you've got essentially the same cast of characters back. I mean, you lost some guys at safety, but I don't know that you're going to be hurting to find guys to step in and fill those roles this year. I think the other piece of it too, you go back to last year. I mean, there were a lot of guys that ended up playing a lot of football for Nebraska that this time a year ago you probably would not have factored into that conversation. I would not have expected to be talking about John Bullock as much as we did in January last year. I think everybody over there liked Deshaun Singleton, but I don't think that everybody kind of knew the impact that he was going to have. I think there's kind of the one piece of it, like, okay, you're getting a lot of your key guys back, the Robinsons, the Hutmakers, that kind of stuff, which is huge. Also, I think the thing that gives me a little bit of confidence that they're not going to take a step back is they've done a really good job of developing guys and finding spots in that defense to let guys play. I mean, James Williams was not on anybody's radar last January, and all of a sudden he's one of Nebraska's best pass rushers when he gets the chance. So I think the way that they approach things will help them continue to build. And I think too, the continuity of having Tony White back for year two is huge. I mean, you see it on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, just having another year of the same verbiage, the same coaching, the same approach is really huge for, kind of building on what you did the year before. And I think that's going to be the case with the defense. And, even the guys that kind of started to show out a little bit last year, I think have a chance to be, all conference type players like Jamari Butler. I mean, he's a guy that is such an arrow up guy in this program. I think there's a lot of confidence that this defense is going to be even better than they were this year, which there's room for improvement. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I mean, they had a heck of a year.
We're talking with Michael Bruntz of Husker 24/7. Bruntz, just as we're putting a bow on the 2024 class and working on the transfer class, the coaching staff already, I mean, they've been at work on this for a while, but looks like they're full throttle on the 2025 class. They got a couple offers out to some local in-state guys yesterday in Pierce Mooberry, as well as Jackson Carpenter, a couple of local guys here in the Omaha and Lincoln areas. It seems like the commitment to in-state recruiting and locking down the guys in the state for Coach Rule was not a one-off this year just because of the talent in the state. It seems like they are all in on keeping Nebraska kids here.
Yeah, no, I think what they were able to do, and I think they've done a really nice job of this, is, they've offered and recruited hard kind of the real like no-brainer kids that have, national offers that everybody's going to be recruiting. And I think what they've figured out, and I think other staffs at Nebraska have maybe been slow to do this, is you need to really recruit local kids like they're not local kids.
Mhm.
Like, you need to make, if you want a commitment from a kid that's in Omaha or Lincoln or Sydney or wherever, you need to recruit them like you would if they were, in Colorado or Iowa or Texas, and not just assume that because they're in-state kids that they're going to, fall over and commit the second you offer. So I think they've done a good job of that. And I know everybody likes the Ed Foley, tweets and where he's eating and where he's going and all that stuff. But I mean, I think that's symbolic. And in some cases, I think also, they made offers at some of those schools that he's been the last 2 years. And, he's not just popping in because they have somebody that's a scholarship level player. And, the thing that I think is fortuitous for Nebraska is you have kind of that work ethic on the recruiting trail and that approach lining up at the same time where the level of talent in Nebraska is as good as it's ever been in terms of, guys that are like Power 5 type players. So that's kind of coming together at a nice time. And I think, Matt Rule and his staff have figured out that you can build a solid foundation of a recruiting class with kids in Nebraska, because, they're not going to be the ones that are going to go home and transfer the second something gets kind of difficult. And, nowadays in college football, that's huge that you can count on that kind of roster continuity. And, I think that, you've seen people around the state that have really appreciated that the actions are kind of lining up with what the coaching staff's saying right now.
Bruntz, I was asked this yesterday over text, and, I don't think there's ever a time where it's too early, but is it ever too early to give an over-under total for this Husker football team? Like, that's the text I got. And I'm like, well, I'll always just give one because, I mean, who cares? Yeah. I like to have fun. Today, Bruntz, I want to ask you this. With who Nebraska has already, expectations that Dylan Raiola is taking the first snap for this team. You can maybe speculate where they get some additions in the room. What would you set that over-under for the team at, and what number in terms of wins, like a winning number, would be like considered delusional?
If I set it at, I know you have to do the half thing. If you set it at 7.5, is that crazy? Is that a good line?
I think that's a fine line.
That's the number.
I think 8 is a good number to shoot for.
Yeah.
But is there a number that's like just crazy out of this world? Like, would that number be 9? Would that number be 10?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't go that high. I think I think until proven otherwise, and as we sit here in early January doing this, I think, I don't know that you can really go higher than like 7 and 5. Like that in my mind is that's a good starting place, because you guys know how this is. Like you get to August, you start getting a little bit of little fall camp Kool-Aid, just a little bit. You just start sipping it in the morning, and you start talking yourself into like a win, maybe 2 wins higher than maybe what you were thinking most of the year. So I think 7 now gives you that chance to maybe add 1 if you need to in August. But I don't know. I mean, you look at the way the schedule is, and, a lot of transfer portal stuff still needs to shake out before you kind of get a good read on where the conference is. And, who knows with the 4 teams they're adding, how that's going to affect things. But I do think that Nebraska has an opportunity to get off to a fast start if they can get the offense piece of it figured out and not turn the ball over. So, I mean, is there a possibility that Nebraska's like knocking on the door of bowl eligibility by the time the bye week hits? Yeah, I think so. But also I'm a little bit, I'll hedge a little bit, just given everything I know about Nebraska football for the last decade or so.
Bruntz, can you imagine the amount of, I don't think it'd be Kool-Aid sipping anymore. I think you'd be taking the full like Gatorade style bath. If we start to hear
Kool-Aid shotgunning.
Yeah. You start to hear little rumblings out of camp. It's like, oh, Dylan Raiola looks like he's every bit the guy we thought he might. Like if you start hearing some of those, you're going to be talking from 7 to 9 pretty quick, aren't you?
Well, yeah. I think that's going to be. I think you got to kind of guard against that. Like, I think everybody needs.
I will not guard against that, Bruntz.
I'm already there.
Just put your coaster over the lip of your glass. You don't want any more. Just let it play out. I think the thing that'll be nice is you'll actually get to see, how things look from the start without having to do it against a Power 5 opponent. I can't.
That is nice.
Stress how big that is for Nebraska to not just have to be ready to go in a conference game right out of the gate.
All right, Bruntz, 1 minute left. You promised me a Roman Empire before you left the segment.
Well, he said he may have.
What do we – I heard it as a promise. What do we have?
I usually – I probably think a little too much about, like, early 90s WWF wrestling.
Oh,
that
that's
doesn't
perfect.
Shock me.
That's
doesn't shock me one
perfect.
bit. When he had Peacock for a week, that doesn't shock me one bit.
I canceled Peacock. I'll be honest.
Taking up too much of your time?
The 97 Royal Rumble, I was like, I'm out. That's a dangerous rabbit hole for me on Wikipedia, is like old wrestlers and whether they're alive or not. So, think about that.
Okay.
Next week, we're going to play Is He Alive from 90s Wrestlers for Michael Bruntz.
Alive or dead?
Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Appreciate you, Bruntz.
See you guys.
See you, Bruntsy.
That's Michael Bruntz from Husker 24/7. Coming up next, we have more Hurrdat Sports Radio. Then coming up at 9:45, we've got Kevin Harlan to wrap up the show here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We're also on KFOR in Lincoln for this third hour. And we're brought to you by our friends at Pratt Dental in North Platte, Nebraska. Dr. Pratt was the first dentist in Nebraska that was certified in the BioClear method and modern smile design, which can correct many aesthetic dilemmas in a permanent and less invasive manner than traditional treatments such as crowns. It's less time, less waiting, less invasive, and fewer appointments because you can get multiple restorations done in the same day. Make sure you go to prattdental.com. That's PRATT dental.com/BioClear-dental-treatment. Or if you just go to prattdental.com, click on services, you'll see BioClear treatment under that tab. Or you can give them a call, 308-221-2800. That is Pratt Dental in North Platte, Nebraska. All right, we had a little time here before we get to our guest at the end of the show, Kevin Harlan. I don't know if you've heard of him. One of the biggest play-by-play voices on the planet. Yeah, he's a pretty big deal.
Oh.
He calls everything. Well, mostly NFL and NBA, but he calls some obviously huge sporting events. We're super excited to talk to Kevin here at 9:43.
Such a great guy.
Before we do that, I wanted to revisit a little bit some of our Hurrdat Hot Suite.
Yeah, we only got to one.
Yeah, hot seat, excuse me.
Yep.
Hurrdat Hot Seat.
Well, we'll sweep up the mess.
Hurrdat Hot Sweep. We only got to the one question because it was there was kind of an expansive question. And you came up with maybe another another little
I got it, man.
Your new Roman Empire.
Yeah, so now that I had some time to think about it, and talking through things helps me think through a lot of
talking to Bruntz about it a little bit, yeah.
So we mentioned conspiracy theories, how I thought Chernobyl, before you explained it, was a conspiracy theory.
And to be fair, within the actual historical event of Chernobyl, there are some conspiracy theories about how it happened.
Some shushes going around.
Government, which, to be fair, in Soviet era Russia, there was a lot of.
It's also just a lot of that in government.
Yes, just the hush hush and shush shush and who was involved in what, and so not totally off, but yeah.
But then I got on to like, man, I kind of do like conspiracy theories, and I dig up like the flat earthers are pretty funny to me, and did people walk on the moon and things like that. So there's just things in history that I go down rabbit holes, and I find myself doing that a lot. And then I made the connection of why I like treasure.
Yeah,
because I watch Pawn Stars all the time on my clips and things, and like when somebody comes in with a coin from possibly the Roman Empire or a coin from when Caesar was around, well, that's
Roman Empire.
Yeah, Roman Empire.
It all comes back to the Roman Empire.
A2 Brute. But like when I see treasures like that, I'm like, gosh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I learn about it through the process, and then I'm like, Rick, how do you know everything about everything?
Yeah,
like, this is so staged. You looked this up on Wikipedia.
He did.
You don't just know these things.
I also, he's such a bad actor too, because he's like, I've got a friend. He knows a lot about this.
Right.
We'll get him over here. And then the guy's there like 30 seconds later. It's like,
love it.
It's probably like 4 days later. The guy comes into.
I love it.
It is interesting though.
But like all of those little treasures. And that's why I'm like, man, if I could come across something like that at some point in time, one day, like I'm not going to buy it from Rick for $100,000.
No, absolutely.
But like if I found it or like it was in my parents' drawer, that'd be sweet.
Are you going to be one of those guys on the beach with like the metal detector?
No, never. But I will be the type of guy that comes in with a bulldozer and scoops up the sand. But that's kind of like what I would think is it for me, because I tell you this all the time. Like when I get into like my own head, like it's just me in there. Like everybody else is gone. We're on the radio sometimes, and I'll look at Ravi and I'll write down the next question I have like in mind based on like what I heard for a short time. And I go, did you ask this question already? Because like I left Earth for about 30 seconds, and that's my fiance hates it. Like she'll be talking to me and I'll be like, I got to try to piece together everything you just said.
Hold on. I got to remove myself I got to disassociate from where my body was for a second and try and recreate this conversation. No, I kind of get that, because sometimes, a little inside baseball here, sometimes it can be a little tricky when you're either having a conversation or doing an interview. Sometimes you want to look something up to like ask the next question, or make sure you get a stat or a name or something right that maybe you just popped into your head and you're like, hey, I want to make sure I get this right before I ask the question.
Shout out to Mike Delaware. He told us that we got something wrong way earlier in the show when we talked about Brandon Baker. And we were thinking Jordan Seaton.
Yes.
And not Brandon Baker.
Yes.
And then we also missed adding in that Seaton signed 2 days after.
Yeah, they both ended up signing.
They were talking about him flipping.
But both,
so we appreciate all you out there.
Appreciate you correcting us, but we try and get it right as much as possible. So sometimes we're looking stuff up, and it is the multitasking can be a little tricky sometimes. So I get that.
I got a question for you though, for Hurrdat.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
I need you to close your eyes.
Okay. Done.
Shane, close your eyes too. Wait, actually, maybe not, because if we go off the air for some reason, like we need your eyes open. All right. My question for you is this.
Okay. Eyes are closed.
You're picturing a scene.
Okay.
Everybody out there, close your eyes for a moment.
Not if you're driving though. You're in the car.
If you're driving,
you're in the car. Keep your eyes open.
Same thing.
Like if you're doing anything important, keep your eyes open.
I don't need to be hearing from the police at some point. Like, why did you tell James to close his eyes?
We created so much business for Dingman's.
One-stop shop for all your car needs.
All right.
Okay.
Eyes are closed.
You're out on the golf course.
Okay.
And you just found a random golf ball.
Okay.
Just right in the middle of the fairway. Sometimes people lose their balls,
Yeah.
and you're like, man, this is sick. I'm going to pick it up.
Or
no one's around.
Or I hit a terrible shot and it ends up in the woods, and there's another ball somebody lost.
So you pick up this golf ball.
Yeah.
And it's a Pro V1.
Okay.
You're getting excited
Yeah,
now. That's
nice
a top-notch golf ball.
Yeah.
You flip it over to the other side.
Yep.
And it's a team logo that you absolutely can't stand.
Okay.
What team has to be featured on that side of the ball for you to chuck it into the pond?
Ooh, okay. Can I open my eyes now?
No.
Okay.
Yes, you can open your eyes.
Okay.
Because it's a Pro V1, remember?
Yeah. So I will say, because I'm not a good golfer, the quality of the ball matters less to me, because just being honest, I'm not good enough for it to matter that much. But I do understand Pro V1's a very good ball, and obviously I would most likely be, free Pro V1, terrific. My initial thought, which my initial thought was the Yankees. Because, I'm a Red Sox fan, which is weird because I'm not nearly as into baseball as I used to be.
But it's just something about that rivalry.
Yeah, that was my gut reaction.
Like if it was Ohio State or if it was
I'd throw it back.
Texas or if it were Iowa.
Texas I don't think I'd throw Iowa back because my grandma loved Iowa, so I'd probably keep it. I probably would throw Texas back. I think I would definitely throw Wisconsin back over Iowa. Hate Wisconsin. I'm trying to think who else.
Like for me, I would also go baseball and say the Cubs.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or the Blackhawks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because those rivalries are just, they've never sat well with me. I don't think I'd play with a Green Bay Packers golf ball either. I would play with a Lions ball.
Yeah.
I would play. I'd probably play with the Vikings, but the Packers, no, absolutely not.
There's really no NFL.
I got a great Packers story for you in a moment.
There's really no NFL team that I viscerally hate, like across all time. Like in the moment, like I used to really hate the Seahawks when they had like the Legion of Boom and like Richard Sherman and all those guys, right? I really hated those teams because they were good and they beat the 49ers. So like in the moment, I hated them. Back when I was a kid, I hated the Cowboys. But it kind of like goes in phases with whoever's good and whoever's beating the 49ers at the time. Right now, it's just kind of like, yeah, I get other teams have beat the 49ers, so it's not, it's not like they win every game. I get that. But there's no one team in the NFL that I'm like, get out of here with that.
Would you ever use the golf ball for a like if Kansas City Chiefs, right? That's probably the team I'd throw back, but I'd actually keep it because I would want to just hold on to it, and then if the Raiders beat the Chiefs again, I would give it to a Chiefs fan, and I'd be like, sorry for your loss.
No, see, if it was a ball I hate, like if I picked up a ball that had the Chicago Cubs logo on it, that thing would become an anchor.
Just tossing it in the lake.
Yep, it's going down to the bottom. And I hope whoever is scuba diving for a ball someday finds it and is really happy. But you know what? It's like when your team, you're in the stands, right? You're in left field, ball comes your way, home run, and it was hit by, and I'm going to use a Yankees example for you.
Yeah.
It was hit by just a no-name player on the Yankees.
So like
if I said Aaron Judge, you'd be like, I'm keeping that ball.
And I low-key kind of like Giancarlo Stanton because I'm a big exit velo guy.
If it was hit by Anthony Volpe, just a random guy, like he's a good player.
Yeah.
But everybody in Fenway is chanting at you to throw it back.
Toss it back.
Like that's how I feel with this golf ball scenario. Like you're tossing it back.
Yeah, absolutely. That is edition part 2 of Hurrdat Hot Seat. Coming up next, we're going to talk to Kevin Harlan. Really excited to talk to him. He broadcasts the NFL, broadcasts the NBA. Super excited to talk to Kevin as we wrap up the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're wrapping up the show here on a Thursday. It's Thursday, right?
Yes.
Pretty sure. There's no Thursday night football tonight, so I'm a little confused. We're wrapping up the show here on a Thursday. Efforting Kevin Harlan right now.
Shane, is our number a 402 number?
I don't know. It comes up.
That is not correct.
It pops up weird.
See, I told him it was going to be a 402 number, so that was my mistake.
It pops up weird.
Got it.
So
he said he just called the line and there was no answer.
All right, let's try and call him back there, Shano. We're efforting Kevin Harlan right now. Yeah, I remember the first time that you guys called me, and it was not a 402 number, and Shane had to text me and be like, "Hey, we just called you. Whenever you're ready." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was a weird number that popped up." So
that is
good
weird.
to know. Anyway, we are trying to get Kevin Harlan here in just a second. As we work on that, we've got a big NFL weekend coming up here, which I'm sure Kevin will be happy to talk with us about as we are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline by Kevin Harlan, the voice of the NFL, the NBA. Kevin, how are you this morning?
I'm doing fine. Good morning. Good to be on with you.
Kevin, thanks for joining us, man. Apologize for the minor inconvenience there.
No, we're good. We're good. I'm in San Antonio right now, and it's about 45, so it's as cold here as it is probably where you are.
Not quite. We started about 25 this morning, so you still got to.
Okay.
You got to see. You still got 45 would be a tropical vacation in Omaha right now. Although you're from Wisconsin, right? So you know all about that.
Yep. I grew up in Green Bay, which is about as cold as the moon is in the wintertime. So, yeah, I'm used to the cold. I just left Kansas City last night. It was cold in Kansas City, too. So we're just at that stage right now. It'll warm up, though. As soon as we start talking about how cold it is, it'll warm up, and we'll be back to being able to go outside. In fact, I passed some golfers the other day in Kansas City, and we're only about 3.5 hours away from you drive time. And there were guys out playing golf the other day. So So we're pretty lucky in the Midwest that we get some moderate temperatures from time to time.
Yeah, and honestly, it hasn't been too bad this year. So we're like, I'm not crazy enough to go out.
37's the new
golf
70.
in this, but anyway, Kevin, I know that you've called a bunch of high profile, really iconic games over the course of your career. Is there is there something that you like doing the most, though? Whether I know you've done college, pro, NFL, NBA, like what's the thing that you enjoy doing the most?
Well, I like each sport in its season. I've kind of, at my stage of my career, have had a chance to be really in the NFL and football lane, and then in college and pro basketball. And I think those probably fit my temperament and style and interest more than anything else. I'm not much of a baseball fan. Hockey, I think, is a difficult sport to broadcast, and I don't have a great deal of knowledge of hockey, although I played it as a kid up in Wisconsin. But football and basketball, I enjoy the most, and it's like when I've had a full football season, I'm ready for basketball. So I'm anxious for my college basketball schedule to kick in here pretty good when the NFL season ends. But I've enjoyed this NFL season immensely, and get a chance to do both TV and radio for the NFL, and that's a real joy of mine. I love the fact I can do both broadcasting platforms. Radio has got its own challenges, and TV certainly has got great challenges too. And I enjoy having a chance to do TV on Sunday and radio on Monday.
Kevin, as you put it, NFL, we're still in the swing of things, and we're getting close to solidifying who will be in the playoffs. 5 teams in the hunt right now, 6 teams in the bubble. One team that I've kind of been paying close attention to, and I know you were on a call recently, is Buffalo, because they've won 4 straight. What stands out to you about the way the Bills are playing right now? And realistically, could they be looked at as the second scariest team in the AFC behind the Ravens?
Well, I've done a couple Buffalo games over the last 6 weeks, and there really is nothing about Buffalo right now that would scare me, quite honestly. They're not playing like the Buffalo team that we saw maybe early this season, we've seen in the past couple years. Really, since they got beaten in the playoffs at home last year by Cincinnati, has Buffalo been what they thought they were going to be, what they could be, and they've not really shaken that loss at home to the Bengals last year. And this year has been up and down. A couple of weeks ago, they were 6-6, and they've won over the last 4 weeks. But it has not been like you're not dazzled by what they're doing. Even the win over Dallas, or they just haven't had that spark. But you know what? A lot of teams are like that. The only team that's really been consistent, you mentioned it, the Ravens. They've had the most consistent season. They've got the presumptive MVP and Lamar Jackson. But Buffalo right now, I don't know really, aside from, as you say, aside from the Ravens, Chiefs are kind of uneven. Buffalo's been uneven. Miami can't beat winning teams.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know really where that scary team or that X factor team is going to jump up and maybe grab the AFC playoffs by the throat. In contrast, the NFC has been dynamite, and there are a lot of good teams there. And while there's no perfect team, there are some really, really strong teams. Detroit, Dallas, Philadelphia, even though they're struggling right now, I still think the Eagles will get it together come the postseason. And certainly San Francisco, which is the best team. And then you've got teams like the Rams that are kind of creeping in. We're going to have a division winner out of the NFC South. And if a Baker Mayfield got in there and got hot, who knows what they could do. So I think there's a lot more intrigue probably in the NFC than the AFC. And that was so counter to the way we entered the season. We entered thinking Buffalo, Cincinnati, Kansas City, maybe Miami, possibly Baltimore. Like those would be the teams to watch, and they are, but not in that order. It's been Baltimore, which has been, front and center and really the best team all season long.
We're talking with Kevin Harlan. He broadcasts NFL and NBA and college basketball games. And Kevin, you mentioned the 49ers there, and I'm curious if you've got, in all your years of experience with the NFL, if you've got a kind of a reference or a context, a contextual point that reminds you of what we've seen with the Brock Purdy situation in San Francisco. Obviously, they'd had no intention of starting him when they drafted him. All of a sudden, he becomes their franchise quarterback. It's a pretty unusual situation. Do you have like a frame of reference for what we've seen here over the last year and a half in San Francisco?
Well, the obvious ones are the Kurt Warners and the Bradys. Brady, a 6th-round draft choice, and Warner wasn't even drafted, and they both went on to become Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And clearly that is not, what you're going to say right now about Brock Purdy. He is surrounded by arguably the best talent in offense and defense in the NFL, and I think it is wrong to classify him as a game manager. He's far more than that. He has operated that offense very deftly, and he deserves all the credit he's getting. But, to be a quarterback in terms of, who is the real, dominant quarterbacks in the NFL, it's going to take a couple years to be like that. And he had a stretch this year where they lost 3 games in a row, and he was not looking good. And he's coming off a game against Baltimore not too long ago, last week, where they did not look good, and there were 5 turnovers. Mm-hmm. So, now granted, there were deflections, and I get all that. But the point is that, he's still a young quarterback and learning, and he's not without landmines in front of him that he's got to watch. But when they're on, the Niners are still, I think, the best team overall in both conferences. And I think 7 times out of 10 they would beat Baltimore. But you can't turn the ball over 5 times as they did against the Ravens last week. So all that being said, you automatically go for the facts, and either undrafted quarterbacks or late round quarterbacks that are drafted. I'm sure I'm missing others, but those 2 names clearly stand out, Brady and Warner, who came on, and no one could have possibly anticipated what they did. But we always have our eyes on the top picks, on the first round drafted quarterbacks. And as we know there, it's a flip of the coin. 50% of the time you're going to hit it, and 50% of the time you're going to screw up, and it's not going to work out. The Achilles Smiths, the Tim Couches, the DeMarcus Russells. I mean, you got all these guys highly drafted that have been flops. And in the counter, you've got the Joe Burrows, and you've got others, who have lived up to the hype and have been just what advertised coming out of college.
Kevin, got about 30 seconds here. I want to get a quick reaction from you before we have to let you go. Are you more confident in the Panthers or the Falcons this weekend to stir up major drama in that division?
I don't know. I am so who cares about those two. Neither interest me, but Falcons have a little bit to play for clearly, and the Panthers are they're a train wreck. Unfortunately, they're just a mess from the top to the bottom, and that needs a complete overhaul. They've really struggled, and it's they're going to lose the number 1 pick again. They would have had it. And they traded it to get Bryce Young, so Chicago has that. So anyway, Carolina is struggling clearly.
Yeah. That's Kevin Harlan. Kevin, we appreciate your time so much, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Good to be on with you.
Thank you, Kevin.
That's Kevin Harlan. He calls NFL, NBA, college hoops, everything under the sun. One of the best in the biz. We super appreciate his time. That's the show for today. We'll be back to wrap up your week and send you into the weekend tomorrow on Friday here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.